The sound of an ambulance wailed noisily outside the city hospital, its engine not yet off. As the emergency room doors swing open for the patient who was being rushed in by 4 orderlies at an unbelievably fast speed, the young boy lying in the middle of the stretcher was pushed inside, his whole body tattered as if he had been struck by 1,000 slashes across his person. The shirt on his body was torn to shreds, his mouth was already on oxygen, and he was currently on the brink of life and death. The orderlies called out to each other urgently, yet carefully, though everyone could see that this kid's condition meant he wouldn't live for long. The police officers escorting the ambulance stopped outside, unsure of what to say to each other. The radio in their car crackled with an officer's voice. The suspects include 6 male students and 2 female students, requesting identity verification. A moment later, another voice responded. According to witness statements, the group of 8 suspects was wearing the uniform of Nungwang Middle School. That was Nungwang's uniform, meaning that middle school kid had been beaten half to death by a group of other middle school kids. The black-shirted police officer, furious, slammed his fist into the steering wheel and cursed. This serious. This isn't just a simple case of school violence. That kid almost died. They knew this would be a complicated mess, and they quickly agreed to go and arrest those kids. But this was going to be a hassle. The press would surely blow it up. Rubbing his head and eyes with a pained expression, he agreed to leave. We definitely have to handle this case. The middle schooler's blood was still splattered on the ground outside the hospital. The boy himself was now sinking deep into a coma, feeling as if he were at the bottom of a vast ocean, completely cut off from the outside world. He remained lost in this stupor until he heard a faint, distant call. The voice sounded urgent, mixed with anguish, compelling him to open his eyes. His vision gradually cleared, and he recognized the person before him as someone very familiar. The woman kept calling out, "Si Younga," and reached out to take his hand, rubbing his head with an affectionate gesture. "You're awake. It's your aunt." There was no response from the skinny boy, who looked no different from a dried-up corpse lying on the bed. She repeated, "It's your aunt. Do you recognize me?" Si Young. Is this aunt? His head felt like it was in pieces, floating around, trying to reassemble themselves. Si Young, he thought to himself. My aunt already went abroad and got married. He felt incredibly tired, wondering where he was, and what the dark shadows in front of him were. Weren't those the 8 bastards who had beaten him to this state? A flicker of memory was enough to make Si Young's frail body feel like it wanted to sink deeper into the sea of despair. He couldn't scream. His eyes just bulged, and his whole body convulsed horrifically, as if having an epileptic seizure. His aunt could only call out his name, Si Younga, in alarm as the boy's body thrashed continuously. Finally, when the doctor rushed into the room and saw Si Young's critical condition like an epileptic fit, he quickly pulled out a syringe pre-filled with a sedative. He writhed in agony until his body felt a sense of relief, and finally stopped. Taking a few difficult breaths, the vein on his arm was bruised and swollen, a consequence of receiving too many IV drips to keep him alive. And this time, because he was awake, the pain was unbearable. His vision gradually faded as he saw his aunt anxiously ask Si Young, "Will my nephew wake up again?" Then he heard the doctor say the boy would fall asleep again after the sedative. His aunt grew even more anxious. He just woke up, and now he's in a coma again. Before his vision went completely black, Si Young heard his aunt's trembling voice apologizing to the doctor. "I'm sorry, doctor. It's just that he's been in a coma for 9 months, so I'm so worried." His vision turned to blackness, but his subconscious was still wondering. "I've been in a coma for 9 months. Why so long?" The next morning, his aunt peeled fruit while talking to the boy on the bed, who looked no different from a dead person. "You know your father thought you would never wake up again. Your mother always prayed for you not to give up. Both your father and mother said they would never forgive that damn group. They would definitely make them pay." As she said that, Si Young's aunt suddenly trembled violently. He could clearly see her seething with hatred. But he couldn't respond, only turning his head to one side, as tears streamed down to his chapped lips. His aunt's voice continued to ring steadily in his ear, protesting, filing lawsuits. Your parents did everything they could. Wiping the tears from her poor nephew's face, the aunt recounted with a trembling voice. Back then, the police and prosecutors all advised settling, but your parents resolutely refused. Your father's only wish was to make those bastards pay. But the result was unacceptable. It was something even I couldn't accept. He stopped crying, but just lay there listening to the rest. You ended up like this because of those 8 kids, and they thought they could get away with just a few tens of millions of won in compensation. They were only suspended from school, and that was it. It's so infuriating. Your parents were usually calm people, but from that moment on, they started to change. They printed flyers everywhere, posted articles on all the forums. They asked all their relatives and acquaintances to sign a petition to let everyone know about their crimes. Just those few sentences were enough to understand how lonely his parents must have been begging for public attention, as his aunt told it. But no one knew. Or rather, no one was allowed to know. The posts on the forums were taken down as soon as they were up. There wasn't a single newspaper article or news segment about the incident. The police didn't have enough authority, and the prosecutors didn't care. All those who wanted to help us were either fired or transferred. That's when your father knew that the parents of those bastards were all powerful people. The police prosecutors and reporters were just puppets in their hands. His aunt trembled, trying to hold back sobs as she continued. While you were still in a coma with no telling when you'd wake up, those kids were already back in school. Your parents were so heartbroken. At this, his aunt covered her face and sobbed uncontrollably. So your father doused himself in gasoline and set himself on fire at Gwanghwamun Square. My sister, your mother, stood in front of your father with a protest sign around her neck. Before he could hear what came next, Si Young's eyes flew wide open. He didn't want to hear it, but he had to hear the next part. Your mother, while screaming for justice, pointed at your father, who was self-immolating, and begged them not to turn a blind eye, begged them to listen. Tears streamed from his eyes, and in his ears was his aunt's panicked voice calling Si Younga. Her nephew, already as thin as a skeleton, was now a mess of snot and tears like a cascading waterfall. He convulsed continuously, opening his mouth to scream, silently praying that he was just dreaming, that it was all just a dream. After waking up once more, it was still just Si Young and his aunt sitting beside him. He wanted to hear his aunt tell him everything that happened afterward. But then Si Young realized he couldn't do anything, because his parents had to burn their own lives to get justice for him. Watching the video that a passerby had recorded, he saw his father self-immolate, and then his mother rushed in to embrace his father's burning body. After that, the funeral was held, and they were both buried. It had been 2 months already, yet he had just been sleeping here. Seeing the silent despair on her nephew's face, Si Young's aunt immediately cried out, "Those bastards have already paid the price." None of them escaped their crime. All 8 of them had to go to a juvenile detention center. A strange-looking smile bloomed on her face as she described how the police, prosecutors, and even the press scrambled to blame each other. A special investigation team and an interagency investigation were launched, and public opinion was in an uproar. As she spoke, the smile suddenly vanished from her face. She turned away and whispered the final words. They were so outraged. Both his aunt and Si Young knew that what happened next was not what they had hoped for, because initially that rotten bunch received a sentence of 6 months of reform at a juvenile detention center. But because of public and online outrage, the sentence was increased to 10 months, then a year, and finally a 2-year sentence. The school principal, 4 headmasters, and the homeroom teacher were all dismissed. Finally, the parents of those bastards had to hold a press conference to publicly apologize to the entire nation. But public opinion didn't let it go that easily. They shared the clip of your parents' self-immolation so that those bastards who were still unharmed could see that horrifying and cruel scene. The number of views skyrocketed to over 7 million. While Si Young was still in a coma, the president also visited, and many media outlets took an interest demanding justice for him. But no matter what, now that he was awake and back in the real world, Si Young was still just an ordinary person, with nothing in his hands, not even his parents. Some time passed. In front of a villa, Si Young saw 2 people shaking hands after a successful real estate contract signing. A man in a suit told a woman with curly hair, "Just transfer the rent into the account on the 2nd of every month. If there are any problems, just contact our brokerage office." The curly-haired woman laughed boisterously. "Well, since we've signed the contract and I've moved in, I can talk to the landlord anytime, right?" The broker's very commercial smile suddenly froze on his lips. His voice suddenly sounded like a threat. "No, ma'am, please don't do that. The landlord has entrusted us to handle all related matters until the contract ends, so please contact us directly." The woman wanted to say more, that since she was here, she should at least greet the landlord, but seeing the broker's firm and decisive attitude, using the excuse that the landlord didn't like meeting strangers, she was surprised. She wanted to ask more, But the broker raised his index finger and added one more thing. By the way, this is not a suggestion, but a warning. Pointing upwards, he said, "The owner of this building is in the attic room on the rooftop." That was the strangest thing she had ever heard, because usually the attic room was the cheapest room in the entire building. He didn't explain further, simply warning her that she was not allowed to use the rooftop under any circumstances, nor was she to enter or exit the rooftop freely. In any case, the iron gate on the stairs leading to the 5th-floor rooftop was locked, so she couldn't get up there anyway. Every word he spoke was strangely tense. Seeing the woman in front of him still wanted to argue, he took 2 steps forward, no different from a debt collector, and asked in a low voice, "Is that inconvenient for you? If it is, we can cancel the contract right now. And if you have any more questions, just say them." Standing before the broker, who had just been amicably shaking her hand, she felt stunned and then stammered, "No, it's nothing." His face, which had been so stern, instantly switched back to a gentle, kind smile. "I wish you all the best," he said, and then promptly left. The broker's words were not wrong. The owner of this building, Si-young, was indeed living in the attic room. He moved his hand to click the mouse in the pitch-black room, with the only source of light coming from the monitor, illuminating several large garbage bags tied up in the corners of the room. Si-young typed clackingly on the computer. They were all the surnames of the ones who had beaten him to this state. First was the Shinjin Group, the second largest in the country's financial sector, very active in this field for the past 5 years, and soon to reach the #1 spot. The Shinjin Group even had a nice-sounding brand slogan, "We want to create a better world, bringing happiness to people. Our business purpose is to protect everyone." Next, he searched for the name Jang Seung-cheol and found the latest information that he had resigned as the director of the Barunjong's law firm because his daughter was involved in a school scandal. The following names, like former Chief Justice Jang Yong-hoo, only showed general information about his family and political life. Nothing outstanding. He clacked away again, moving to Blue Wing Media, seeing they were still doing business as usual. 2 years ago, the chairman's daughter was embroiled in a school violence scandal that caused outrage, but they turned this scandal into a powerful promotional tool for themselves. The 5th on the list was the WF Group, one of the first online portals in Korea. Although they had faced accusations of monopolistic practices, their business was generally not much affected. He read and reread the news about the lives of the families of those who had bullied him, with no sense of how much time had passed until the phone on the floor buzzed violently. It notified him that the real estate agency had received the rent money into his account, but Si-young only glanced at it, and then returned to searching for things online, not paying any attention. Not a few seconds later, the phone rang again, this time an incoming call. He felt extremely annoyed, glancing at it with a dazed look. Still not answering, but he read the text message from the number that had just called. Someone said they would be there in 10 minutes. Only then did Si-young turn off the computer, slowly pushing his chair back as his feet touched the ground. He saw his metal door looking as if it was being sucked in from the outside by a monster, making a terrifying bang. He wasn't startled. On the contrary, he just felt wary, taking slow steps toward the door where a woman's urgent voice, mixed with her playful laughter, could be heard from outside. "I just wrote 1 minute instead of 10 by mistake." He showed no reaction, just looked outside with a loathing gaze. The woman's silhouette on the door fell silent for a moment. He heard the clatter of metal against metal from inside. Si-young's messy head appeared, and as he squinted, the daylight shone directly into his eyes, making his vision turn white. He raised a hand to shield them, and before his eyes could adjust, he saw the woman's figure quickly dart into the house. As she entered, she grumbled, "It's so chilly. You're the building owner, yet you're living in the attic. If it were me, I would never live here." He glanced at her and then slammed the door shut. Her mouth, even inside the house, was still chattering away. "Hey, Si-young, if you're home, turn on the lights. Do you want to go blind early or something?" He turned on the light as she said, but the entire room had only a single light bulb in the center. Only now could the scenery in the room for one person be clearly seen, a mess of garbage bags stretching from the door to the edge of the bed, which didn't even have a blanket. Bora grumbled, Hey, live like a human being. What is all this crap?" Si-young just made a sound that was barely a response, and she only seemed to be grumbling, not actually making him clean up or anything. Holding up a folder in her hand, she said, "I have a blind date today, so we'll do a quick checkup, okay?" Neither agreeing nor refusing, Si-young just gave her an indifferent look. She asked a series of questions about his hands, feet, hips, eyes, and headaches. and Si Young continuously said they were a little uncomfortable. To every question he would say a little uncomfortable with a very vague expression, mainly because his eyes were still fixed on the dense lines of code running on the screen. Looking up at it, he then looked at the phone in his hand and glanced over at the nurse who was busily writing in the folder in her hand. By this time, they had reached his blood pressure, 140/100. Bora sighed, and then reminded Si Young of a few things he should and shouldn't do. She also informed him, "It's been 2 years. People's patience has its limits." But no matter what she said, Si Young showed no sign of having heard her. She widened her eyes to get his attention, but the kid in front of her just kept tapping away at the screen. A moment later, she felt her phone vibrate. Bora took it out to look. And who knows what she read, but her face clearly showed displeasure. She stood up abruptly and yelled right in Si Young's face, "Hey, have I mentioned money yet? You think you're so smart now, huh?" Si Young still didn't answer, looking at her with an indifferent gaze. That expression of his made people want to go crazy. Stomping heavily on the wooden floor, knowing Si Young wasn't listening, but still having to remind him, "From now on, don't do that anymore. Whether you go to school or not, you have to go outside. Go out and meet people." Still receiving no reply from Si Young, she just opened the door and walked out. He heard the creaking of the hinges gradually closing and just sat there hugging his knees in front of the screen, plugging his phone into the computer's power source. The first image that appeared was of his happy family when he was little and his parents were still alive. He tapped on the purple icon on it and saw it pop up like a specially installed software. Si Young swiped through the social media feed wanting to click and see some posts, but he saw a message saying he couldn't view it because they weren't friends. The post was set to a restricted audience, so it couldn't be opened. He looked up at the still-lit screen, which had only a red question mark in the middle of a bright green screen. When he clicked on it, a series of tables along with long lines of code appeared before Si Young's eyes. He looked at it for a while, then looked down at the phone in his hand. Finally, he saw that post open up. It was a series of messages between the group of people who had beaten him half to death. At first, it was just a few casual questions. Then they talked about something related to going abroad and returning to the country. A guy named Soo Hyun in the group said, "Shut up. We're supposed to keep it a secret, even in the group, aren't we?" Because his father had warned him that this time he absolutely had to become the head of the National Tax Service so he couldn't get involved in any scandals. He then reminded a few others in the group not to reveal that 6 of them were preparing to go to the US. The other 2 where they were, they didn't reveal. They seemed more secretive than the others, not even answering when people in the group asked. In short, they were still living very good lives. Si Young put the phone face down. He stood rigidly in front of the computer screen, grinding his teeth with an unwilling expression. Then, for some reason, he moved to the corner of the room, jumped onto the empty, smelly bed, and lay down on his back, letting the upper half of his body stretch out under the sunlight streaming from the window. Despair or anguish? Si Young didn't know. He had been doing these things repeatedly for almost 2 years now. Each time he felt it was unacceptable, and then he would just close his eyes and let everything pass. How could he know that outside the area he lived in, beyond even the Earth with its billions of people, the blue planet continuously spinning on its axis and revolving around the sun, was something hurtling towards it at a dizzying speed? It left streaks of light in space, like a meteor just streaking through the cosmos. But when NASA used the SBY telescope to look closer, they discovered that thing didn't have the shape of a rock. It looked very much like a sword hurtling in from outer space. What the hell? It slammed straight into the rooftop of Si Young's building, exploding with a loud bang and leaving behind a giant pillar of smoke. The person lying in the attic room like him felt the most intense tremor. No matter how indifferent he was, the young man sat up instantly. But the space around him was too quiet, as if the sound just now was just a dream. Si Young wondered what just happened. The sound just now didn't come from below, did it? He took 2 steps without looking around the bed, thinking it was like something had fallen from above. He listlessly walked towards the door and stood there thinking, maybe it's a thief. If not, then who could it be, those 8 damn bastards coming to find him? Knowing they were living normal lives, why did Si Young still feel like they were ghosts chasing him endlessly? The thought of it made his chest ache so much that he had to clutch his shirt. Trying to take a few deep breaths, trying not to faint, Si Young clenched his trembling right hand into a fist. He narrowed his eyes, giving himself the motivation to take step by step towards the metal door, which was fitted with many different types of locks, He opened them one by one from top to bottom before opening the electronic lock on the handle. For some reason, Si Young felt so scared that his throat felt dry. He finally turned the handle. He pushed the metal door open and saw light pouring in from it, not quite like sunlight. He still had to raise a hand to shield himself from that light, but it was too intense. After a moment, Se Young was stunned to realize that the brilliant light was not from the sun. But the thing emitting that sparkling light was a 100% real sword, with a piece of red cloth tied to its hilt, looking ancient. It was stuck in the rooftop floor, causing several long cracks and bursting into roaring flames. No matter how you looked at it, it was surreal. Why would a sword appear here? It was still clearly daytime, so there was no way Si Young's eyes were playing tricks on him. He took 2 more steps to get closer to the sword, staring at it, trying to figure out why there was a sword here. But most importantly, who and why was it here? His room was in the attic. It would take some kind of force to stick this sword into the ground, right? Thinking he was going crazy, Si Young shook his head, shaking off sweat, covered his eyes, then opened them and saw it was still there. He took a few steps closer, and realized he could see the sword clearly, partly because of its incredibly striking appearance. This was the kind of sword that often appeared in games, but what was its name? A 2-handed sword or a Zweihänder. In short, he didn't know, but what kind of sword was so tall? For a young man who was only 158 meters tall, this sword was probably a whole head taller. He walked around this thing with a suspicious look, thinking to himself, am I the only one who saw it get stuck here? And it's stuck in pretty tight, huh? The rooftop even has a few cracks. And the most important question is who stuck it here? He whirled around to look at the only possible way to the rooftop, and saw clearly that the staircase door was still locked. So who stuck this sword here and for what purpose? The more he thought, the more his messy head felt like it was about to explode. How was the most important thing? Thinking and thinking, he couldn't figure out who or how. He got so frustrated that he screamed a few times, making some old ladies in the neighborhood below look up, thinking a new strange animal had appeared. Si Young couldn't keep his composure anymore. He grabbed his head and messed up his hair, roaring, I give up. I'm dead. I already said, I don't know. After screaming his lungs out, he panted heavily. Maybe I should just stop being curious, no need to wonder anymore. He turned around and went back into his room, intending to close the door. He didn't know where the sword came from, nor did he know who had stuck it there. But his room inside wasn't affected, so the legend of the sword Excalibur suddenly appearing on the rooftop meant nothing to him. He flopped onto the empty bed as if he had just gone through something very tiring. Si Young was drenched in sweat. He closed his face and told himself he wouldn't care about it. He slept like that until the sky began to darken, still snoring away. The sword, having been ignored for a whole day, suddenly made thudding sounds. Like the drums of war or something? The rooftop shook violently, creating tremors that spread to Si Young's room, waking him from a deep, mesmerizing dream. Suddenly pulled from his sleep, Si Young felt his heart beat violently along with the sound of a bugle. The scene before his eyes was so strange. He saw hundreds of people striking their spears and lances on the ground, standing solemnly in thick armor, open eyes big. Si Young found himself standing in the middle of identical rows of soldiers like models in an exhibition. The thundering sound accompanied by the bugle made the young man turn his head everywhere, searching for the source. Then his eyes widened in horror, as he saw a swarm of things that looked like a mix between birds and insects, swarming and covering the sky. On the ground in front of him were huge giants with 2 arms stomping thunderously on the ground, stepping over small fortresses that only reached their knees, advancing towards where the army stood. Leading them was a person wearing a long red cloak that reached his heels. That person brandished a sword with a golden hilt that looked very familiar. That sword, just like in Si Young's memory, was very tall, taller than the man himself, but he wielded it with great ease. He narrowed his eyes, focusing on that thing, trying to understand what was happening here. Suddenly, a strong wind rushed into his mouth like being on a roller coaster. Si Young stood rooted to the spot, feeling as if millions of rays of light had just flashed through his consciousness. His mouth felt like it was being stretched to its absolute limit backwards. He had to brace himself for a moment. And then suddenly everything disappeared. He leaned forward, panting, and then slowly opened his eyes, looking straight at where the sword should have been in the hands of the man in the cloak. Now he was extremely surprised to see it stuck in a pile of corpses of all sorts of people and strange beasts, while the ground was littered with specks of fire. Si Young was terrified. The way that sword was stuck was no different from the one on his rooftop. He just stared like that until he realized he was sitting on his bed, staring blankly into space. The image vanished in a flash, leaving the very familiar room, which made Si Young take a few seconds to recover. The image vanished in a flash, leaving the very familiar room, which made Si Young take a few seconds to recover. He bent down, holding his face, wondering if it was a dream or what. The sound outside seemed to be urgently calling him. The continuous thudding sounds were coming from the rooftop outside. What else could it be? His face covered in sweat again. The young man wondered what the hell. He jumped out of bed, telling himself it probably wasn't a dream. Si Young was very scared, feeling as if a ghost was waiting behind that door. But it kept urging him on. He figured that even if he ignored it, the sound wouldn't just disappear on its own. He opened the series of locks on the metal door again. Si Young peeked outside and still saw the strange light radiating from it. But this time, it was so strange that it made the young man slam the door shut, not believing it. "Are you kidding me, you damn dog?" He opened the door again and saw that the sword was burning more fiercely than a temple fire. What kind of damn sword could ignite itself like that? It wasn't just the sword burning. Si Young's entire rooftop was ablaze, the fire spreading everywhere, leaving only a 1-meter radius around his room door. The rooftop had now turned into a sea of fire. Taking a few more steps was extremely difficult, making a quick decision. Si Young turned back into his room, running frantically into the bathroom where a basin of water had been filled since who knows when. He resolutely grabbed the rim of the basin, lifting it with all his youthful strength, but found he couldn't. He tried a few more times, but the basin didn't budge. Clearly, the little muscle on his body was of no use. Well, just pour some out. No need to try so hard. He was finally able to lift the basin of water, rushing towards the burning sword right outside his room door. Using all his strength, he aimed at it and threw the water at the sword. However, the amount of water Si Young could carry was less than a spider's piss. It evaporated instantly upon touching the top of the flames. He cursed son of a bitch, and then carried the red basin back into the house, yelling and screaming, "What the hell is this?" After about 30 or 40 more rounds like that, the young man was panting heavily, sitting exhausted in the middle of the smoky rooftop. Looking down at his trembling hands from using too much force, Si Young felt completely exhausted. He thought about something, then stood up, but the bones in his back cracked like an old man's because he hadn't moved for so long, which made him feel like it hurt like hell. After trembling for a while, he noticed the green thing on the right. Holy crap, so beautiful and neat it was an unused water hose. Si Young felt like a complete idiot. Why didn't he just say so from the beginning? Why didn't he use this to put out the fire in the first place? The clock ticked, gradually approaching 12 o'clock, and when it struck 12 exactly, Si Young was pulled from a drowsy sleep by the familiar resounding thuds, so familiar that he couldn't even be bothered to be annoyed anymore. Si Young sat up in his bed, stretched his arms and legs, yawned a long yawn, still feeling groggy, but he could completely drag himself to the metal door. Opening it, he saw the roaring fire and a few scattered sparks in the air. He put his hands in his pockets, walked over to the water valve where the hose was already attached, glanced at the fire around the sword, and felt it wasn't strange at all. The past 4 days were enough for him to get used to it. He turned on the faucet, pointed the hose towards it, and sprayed water directly at the tip of the sword stuck in the rooftop floor as if watering a plant. Wondering, I clearly heard a sound like a drum when I woke up. Where did it come from? And why is this sword on fire? He looked up again at the blazing sword, but the red cloth behind it wasn't burned. There were so many questions about this thing that Si Young couldn't find the answers to. Another day passed, and as the clock struck 12 exactly, the sounds like war drums continuously urged Si Young. This time he didn't feel drowsy but angry at being pulled from his sleep. He sat up and cursed loudly. "Fuck you guys. Let me sleep for a bit. I want to sleep." He was angry. He was furious. He wanted to go crazy. So the next day, before the clock struck 12, Si Young was no longer in his room. His room was still a mess full of dark black garbage bags, but its owner was staring intently at the red and yellow sword that looked like something from a fair. This time he even brought a chair from his room and sat opposite the sword, waiting for 12 o'clock. As soon as it struck, he immediately saw the war drum sounds coming from the sword in front of him. Wow, it's really happening. The young man tightened his grip on the water hose, saw the ground beneath where the sword was stuck start to emit sparks. He sprayed the damn stream of water fiercely at the sword, extinguishing the flames that had just started. He sprayed the damn stream of water fiercely at the sword, extinguishing the flames that had just started. However, as soon as he stopped spraying, the flames roared back to life. He sprayed again, seeing the water flow down the sword's body. Si-young smiled, thinking, "This should be it, right?" A moment later, thinking he had solved the problem outside, Si-young returned to his room, clacking away on his computer. He moved the mouse and sat in front of the brightly lit screen, searching for a while, feeling as if he had found a solution. He returned to face the sword. Si-young put on a very serious expression, and right as it started making thumping sounds and the fire was about to spread, Si-young's eyes were full of determination. With one hand spraying water, the other pulled out a cross made from disposable chopsticks. He held his homemade cross, straight out muttering prayers in the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, all that mumbo-jumbo. Right as a small flame appeared on the sword, he sprayed his homemade holy water on it and waited. About 2 seconds later, the fire erupted more fiercely than usual, as if protesting Si-young's exorcism, forcing him to retreat hastily, yelling and screaming. He tried again, exorcising with all the power God had given him. He yelled, "Satan, be gone." Who knows how long it had been, but Si-young found that the amount of water coming out of his spray bottle was less than the sweat pouring down under the sun. He muttered something about, "In the name of God, I command you," with a completely exhausted look. The sword didn't react at all, letting him continue to mumble, "I cast you out, Satan." Then he felt like he was being made a fool of, so he threw everything in his hands away, cursing, "Fuck you all," and grabbed his messy hair, panting heavily. "The fire will go out when morning comes, right? Just a moment ago it was blazing, but now it's all gone." He looked up at the sky above, feeling incredibly tired. "Will tonight be the same as this? It can't be like this. It's been almost a week already." Si-young looked determinedly at the thing in front of him, his hands clenched tightly. He had made a very bold decision. "Today I will fight you. To fight you need tools." Si-young found a toolbox full of repair tools somewhere in the building. He grabbed a hammer with a wooden handle that looked quite sturdy. He held it thought for a moment, then gritted his teeth and smiled slyly, thinking, "You damn sword, I'll take you down with this." He held it for a bit to get used to it, then let out a puff of air like a whistle, half like a challenge to the sword in front of him. Then he took 2 or 3 quick steps, accelerating his body towards the sword. Si-young swung his arm, whipping the hammer forward, slamming its metal head into the hilt of the sword. There was a loud kang, and he saw something shoot out, whizzing past his head not far and embedding itself in the brick wall behind him with a loud bang, just like 2 hard objects colliding. Before he realized what that thing was, Si-young felt his right arm become much lighter. The head of the hammer had flown off the wooden handle and was now stuck in the brick wall behind him. He looked at that thing, then at the strange sword in front of him. What the hell kind of sword is this? Unwilling to give up, he gritted his teeth and turned back into his room at the fastest speed possible. The young man rummaged around inside, making clanging and rattling sounds for a while. Then, as if he had found what he was looking for no more, noise came from inside. When Si-young returned to the rooftop, his posture seemed much more stable than before. It turned out that in the young man's hand was a metal baseball bat painted a beautiful blue color. He looked at the sword with determination, as if it were his enemy. Although his weak arm holding the baseball bat seemed to tremble, Si-young just charged straight at the sword with the baseball bat in his hand. He slammed this thing hard into the hilt, hearing a keng sound, and while the young man was still exerting force, the head of the baseball bat was shot back. He saw the familiar blue light rush towards his face unexpectedly. It hit Si-young right in the face with a thwack, then spun 360 degrees up to the roof, leaving his hand and leaving its owner with a big lump on his head, knocked flat on the rooftop floor in great pain. He had endured many pains in his life, but this was one of the pains he never wanted to endure. He just held his forehead like that in so much pain he wanted to cry, grinding his teeth in all sorts of ways, then sat up abruptly, showing off the big swollen lump on his forehead, cursing, "You damn sword, I won't give up." He was so angry he couldn't take it anymore. He reached out and grabbed the hilt of the sword, wanting to lift it. Suddenly he heard his heart thumping as his 2 hands touched the massive hilt. But who cared anymore? Today there would be only one winner. As soon as he lifted the sword, Si-young heard cracking and tremors from under his feet, transmitting to his brain. The rooftop ground rumbled with the sound of fire seeping through the cracks. It suddenly burst into giant flames taller than Si-young's head. He looked around, cursing. "What the hell? Why is it on fire again? It's not even 12 o'clock yet, and it's already burning like crazy." Si-young didn't know what to do, his hands still not leaving the sword's hilt. When he turned back again, he saw that the light shining on his face was not fire. but a giant sphere that looked like the sun formed by the gathered flames about 5 meters above his head, burning fiercely, looking absolutely surreal. No matter how he looked at it, that sphere was sucking up all the fire on the rooftop, gathering it into its own size. Si Young just stared blankly. And then that sphere hit him straight in the head without any resistance. It was like a rain of fire seeping into every cell, every pore. Even his eyes, nose, and mouth pouring into him and causing strange, inhuman veins to spread across his skin. With his agonizing screams, all his fragmented memories seemed to be pulled back into a single thread, both like memories and like images, some strange, some familiar. Si Young felt his head ache as if it were being split by an axe, feeling as if the two hemispheres of his brain wanted to separate. A few images like memories flashed through his head, and strange emotions not like his own were tearing his consciousness into several pieces. He cried out in pain until the light gradually diminished, becoming a few scattered sparks in the air. When the fire disappeared, leaving only smoke, the tip of the sword pulled by Si Young's force popped out of the ground. As he fell backward, the young man panted heavily, drooling, but he finally had the hilt of the sword in his hand. It seemed he had succeeded. Lying spread-eagled on the rooftop, Si Young heard people murmuring, "Why has it been so noisy on the rooftop every night lately?" You on the 3rd floor heard it too. This morning, there was some kind of screaming for about 2 or 3 hours. My whole family couldn't sleep. The old ladies agreed, adding, "My goodness, if you on the 4th floor are like that, then we living on the 5th floor are about to die. I don't know what they're doing, but they keep banging on the floor like that." The woman in blue whispered, "My husband isn't angry. He just finds it magical." They suddenly started whispering because none of us has ever met the landlord. The man living on the 5th floor said he had been renting here for almost 2 years. "But I've never met the landlord." The woman from the 5th floor nodded. "That's right. To this day, I still don't know if the landlord is male, female, old, young, or gay. This morning, I also contacted the management at the brokerage, telling them that there have been screams for the past few days and that they should report it to the police." After explaining so clearly, the other people got curious and asked, "So what did he say?" "He said the screaming all day and night won't cause any human-related problems, so I don't need to report it to the police." The women were taken aback. "What kind of answer is that? So irresponsible." "Well, he said he would contact the landlord himself to ask clearly, and told us to wait until then because everyone knows the landlord is the person living in the attic." The legendary landlord was now lying on his back on the rooftop, groaning like a dog about to go mad. He just lay there, opening his mouth and screaming, "Ah," as if someone had poked him in the butt. After screaming his fill, he realized no one was doing anything to him. The young man sat up, rubbing his aching head, wondering, what did I just see? Was it a dream? If it was a dream, why did it feel so real? Kneading his face, Si Young felt it was like a memory with emotions. That made his heart ache. It had joy, pain, despair, mixed with a bit of excitement, sadness, and hatred. All the emotions he received were incredibly real. Feelings that had been suppressed for so long it was unimaginable. But why that happened? How could he know, shaking his head as if to shake off those questions? Si Young tightened his hand, intending to stand up. Suddenly he felt something hard in his right hand and was startled to realize that the thing in his right palm was the hilt of that giant sword. Looking at it then at himself, Si Young couldn't remember why he was holding it. He was so scared as if he had just grabbed a girl's chest and immediately let go, looking around as if afraid someone would see him holding the sword. Hey, the sword is here, which means it has been pulled out, and the mark where the sword was stuck in the ground has completely disappeared. The rooftop looked as if nothing had ever happened. And from this angle, Si Young discovered that the sword was about 1 meter longer than when it was stuck in the ground. It's this long, and it didn't pierce the ceiling of the floor below. That's so surreal. Not knowing what he was thinking, the young man summoned all his strength to lift the sword, just like lifting a block of concrete. His body trembled, but he managed to push it, tilting it precariously. This sword had a part on the blade it seemed for skinny, malnourished kids like Si Young to grab, but he still wasn't strong enough. His trembling arm made the sword about to fall on him. As expected, unable to bear the weight, Si Young was pinned by it like a wooden plank across his body, feeling as if his soul was about to fly to the moon. After struggling for a long time, he managed to prop the sword, which was taller than his room, up near the door, then propped himself up with his hands panting and gagging from using too much strength. He looked at this damn sword again, not knowing what to do. He just stood there blankly for a moment, then ran his right hand over the shiny blade, which looked as if it were polished daily. Suddenly, 4 words echoed in his head, the war sword. He quickly pulled his hand back. Wasn't that the name of the sword? Then 4 other words unexpectedly popped into his head. Thunder God Walker. This wasn't the sword's real name. Someone had arbitrarily named it that. He clutched his chest again, wondering why he knew these things. Suddenly a voice whispered in his mind. Spirit and will to fight. Do not allow one to tremble before anything, not to bow and not to retreat. At that the young man shot his head up, grabbed whatever part of the sword he could with both hands, clenched it and pulled it away from the wall. Just that much made Si Young pant heavily. He lowered the tip of the sword, dragging it across the rooftop to reduce the burden, then closed his eyes tightly, thinking about the sword techniques that had spontaneously appeared in his mind. He simulated what he felt in his mind immediately following the instructions, from how to swing the sword, how to hold it, to how to slash down, then spread his arms wide, lifting it in front of him majestically, and swung the giant sword behind him very neatly. He took a few deep breaths, then exhaled, letting his body movements follow those images. This feels pretty good, huh? Si Young organized those images. He held the sword out in front of him, muttering, following a more difficult posture which was pointing the sword tip up into the air. Using all his strength with veins bulging on his face, he gritted his teeth and flicked the sword up, hearing a whoosh as if it had cut through the air. I did it, the young man smiled with delight. Then turned 180 degrees, the sword tip exactly like the image inside his body. However, as soon as he extended his leg, his muscle strength vanished. The sword crashed down on one of Si Young's shoulders, making him feel a terrible pain. And then the familiar sound echoed again, wanting to flip the whole building over. He fell face first onto the floor, the giant sword flying a few meters away. Si Young, while breathing, felt like he wanted to vomit. He panted a few times, closed his eyes, wanting to rest. Until that afternoon, as the sun began to set, Bora looked at the kid, covered in patches from his neck to his chest, who was avoiding her gaze. She crossed her arms and asked, "What's wrong that you actively called me like this? And what's with this look?" About half an hour ago, Bora was on a date with a handsome man in a suit, laughing and talking happily. Suddenly, she heard her phone buzz next to her, and excused herself. "Let me answer the phone for a moment, okay?" He politely agreed, but as soon as Bora picked up, she showed her displeasure. "It's been a while since I had a blind date, and which bastard is calling at this hour?" Unexpectedly, a trembling voice came from the other end. "Help me, Nuna," which made her forget all about handsome and ugly men. She shot up from the table, bowed her head, and then Bora turned and left the cafe, saying, "I have an urgent matter, so please excuse me." She walked so hastily as if her house were on fire and someone had died. Finally, standing in the attic room, looking at the messy kid, avoiding her gaze, she questioned him. "I missed a date with a man to come here only to find you looking like this, huh?" Her scrutinizing eyes roamed over his body, and then stopped on Si Young's heavily bandaged arm. Bora frowned, staring intently at the boy. "What the hell did you do to sprain both your wrists?" "Not one, but both." "And what's with your back and waist? Why are they covered in patches?" Knowing he couldn't get away with not talking, Si Young stammered, I was exercising." The reason sounded convincing, didn't it? Bora was surprised, put her hands on her hips, and looked down at the little kid in front of her. Then she burst out laughing, unable to hold it in. "A kid like you who hasn't stepped out of the house in 2 years is exercising? You're kidding me." Suddenly being insulted, Si Young turned to look at the older sister who was poking his flat stomach with her index finger. "Just some light exercise, and you're already a wreck. That's strange, isn't it?" Seeing Bora's smile become more and more wild. "Don't tell me you exercised continuously for 2 hours and then lifted 100-kilo weights, did you?" Wanting to tease the kid some more. Suddenly, Si Young's phone on the floor rang continuously. It said Happy Real Estate was calling. He tried to get up, but before he could reach the phone, Bora had already answered flirtatiously. "Hello, yes, this is Si Young's phone. Me, I told you I'm his nurse. You asked who I am, so I said, I'm a nurse. What else?" Her voice sounded annoyed as she replied to the person on the other end. "I'm a nurse from H University Hospital. My name is Kim Bora, in charge of his regular health checkups." She turned to look at the kid when the other side asked about the screaming the downstairs residents had been hearing for the past few days. Bora frowned, looking at the kid suspiciously when the other side wanted to know about Si Young's health condition. He shook his head, continuously signaling that he didn't want others to know, so Bora replied, "The kid is fine. He's very healthy now and his mental state is quite okay." As soon as the person on the other end asked to speak to Si Young, she deflected. This kid normally doesn't answer the phone. If it's something important, just text him. However, the other side insisted on hearing Si Young's voice, so she brought the phone closer, telling the kid who was struggling to sit up. Try to act normal. The real estate office owner is very worried about you. Just sitting up had taken all his strength. Si Young managed to say into the smartphone, "This is Si Young." Just that was enough to make him collapse back onto the bed, panting heavily, letting Bora continue the conversation. "You heard him right. I'll let the boy know if there's anything. Bye." She hung up, impatiently asking Si Young, "What's all this? The tenants here say you've been screaming your head off every night for the past few days. What's going on?" He turned his face away and said, "It's nothing." But Bora's eyes never left the kid for a second. Finally, knowing he couldn't hide it, he told a half-truth. "I just felt very suffocated, like my heart was about to burst. So I did that." Bora was about to scold the kid, but suddenly she fell silent, thinking about the time she had to spoon-feed him, to keep him alive on his hospital bed at Hawa Hospital. She had used so many words from coaxing to scolding, but he showed no desire to live. Many times she also felt like giving up, let alone Si Young. Yet suddenly he spoke up. "It's okay now, Nuna, I've calmed down now." Really saying that and then saying it wasn't true. Si Young didn't know how to convince her, so he turned away and said, "I'm going to rest now." Behind him, the nurse was waving her hands and feet, giving confused instructions. "Remember to change the bandages yourself. Except when moving, don't take off the protective pads, or it will swell up." She gave a series of instructions on how to treat the wounds, but the kid pretended not to hear. Kim Bora was tired of talking. She turned around and said, "I know you're uncomfortable, but I'll be here on Tuesdays and Thursdays every week." Hearing that, Si Young turned back and asked, "Huh, what did you just say?" She ignored the boy's shocked voice, touching her lips and murmuring, Not next week, but the week after next. On Tuesdays and Thursdays I'll be here. You just need to know that." Without letting the kid refuse, she had already vanished from the place, slamming the door and leaving only one sentence behind. "No matter what, I'm coming." "See," Young gritted his teeth, wanting to curse. "I told you I don't need it." He hadn't been resting for long when he heard his building seem to shake again. It was the thumping sound of drums right under his bed, which was surrounded by garbage bags that had been piling up for who knows how long. He let out a helpless sigh, seeing the garbage bags also trembling with the rhythm of the drums. He tilted his head down to look under the bed and saw the sword lying horizontally, not moving at all. But the thumping sound of the drums was very clear. Maintaining that position, he sighed in frustration, and finally reached his hand under the bed to pull the sword out. In short, it was heavy as hell. The young man used all his strength to pull the sword out from under the bed, threw it onto the mattress, and had to stop for about 2 seconds because of the sharp pain shooting from his wrist up through his body. He wanted to touch the sword, but had to take a few more deep breaths. Only then did the pain register in his consciousness. It was trembling so much it was hard to control. Suddenly, a male voice that sounded like it was laughing echoed in Si Young's head. "Well done. A good start. If you don't fall, you won't know how to get up." He was completely startled. He turned his head to see who was talking. But clearly, there was no one else in the room but him. But why does this voice sound so familiar? The voice continued to ramble. "When you were little, every time you fell, you would feel pain. When you grow up, when you stumble, you just feel embarrassed." He scratched his head, wanting to know what this voice was. It didn't explain what it was or where it came from, just kept rambling, giving Si Young a huge headache. The way to become stronger is very simple. Pick up the sword and run, then swing the sword until you're exhausted. Just like that. He heard it, but as for doing it, not a chance, giving the bed to the massive sword. Si Young collapsed among the garbage bags, thinking about that voice telling him to swing the sword. If I do that, will I really get stronger? He sat up like a zombie, looking around, and then decided if it's too hard, I'll just Google it. His hands were bandaged, but his typing speed didn't slow down at all. He typed two-handed sword into the search bar and clicked to see. A series of articles and discussions on the topic appeared before his eyes, so I'm not the only one researching this issue. The most prominent was a title that read, "Learning the Two-Handed Sword in 4 months." With the original poster uploading clips of his training over the 4 months, Si Young realized it was a fluent Korean speaker and stared in amazement. Unexpectedly, all his movements were exactly like what had been whispered in his head. He had been practicing how to swing the sword exactly like how people practice the two-handed sword in 4 months. But his own movements, when imitating the images in his head, seemed even smoother than the person in the clip. It was surreal. He stared wide-eyed, watching it over and over, then clenched the loose trousers with both hands, turned to look at the sword lying bare on the bed. Si-young thought, I think I've done that too. But where's the strength to do it now? My waist and hips are already stiff again. Where's the strength to hold this sword again? Yet for some reason, at this moment, Si-young's vision seemed to be sucked into the sword. His dark black pupils stared intently, and it was as if he saw the entire universe opening up right before his eyes. A few days later, Bora came back to change his bandages, muttering in confusion. How can this be? An injury like this should take about 3 weeks to heal, but you've recovered in just a few days. Did you secretly use some kind of miracle medicine? Again, she didn't see the kid answer, but just lay on the bed. Bora turned her back and waved goodbye. I'm leaving now that you can walk again. Don't be careless. He waved his hand in a dismissive goodbye, which made her so angry she wanted to turn back and punch the kid. Gritting her teeth, she repeated, now that you can walk again, don't be careless, and then slammed the door, leaving the attic room. After a few minutes, when everything around was quiet, he thought she's gone, right? Probably. He sat up in his bed, shook his wrists, thinking Bora Nuna said it would take more than 3 weeks to fully heal, but now both my wrists have the strength to clench again. This fast, this must be the main character's power, right? Since hearing the nagging voice in his head, Si-young had gotten used to it. He walked over, pulled the hilt of the sword he had hidden under the bed, put it on his skinny back, and dragged it out of the room, telling himself, the voice from those memories sounds so creepy like a ghost, but it has never stopped talking in my head. Now that voice was asking a silly question. Aren't you brave enough to run outside? Dragging the sword outside was already exhausting as hell. Run what? Stepping out onto the rooftop, he saw the sword tip dragging on the ground until it was in the right position. Then he put both hands on the hilt. Using all his strength, the young man used his front leg as a pivot and flicked the sword up. But it only went about 90 degrees before he felt like he was out of fucking strength. The sword tip slammed hard onto the rooftop floor with a thud, and he panted in frustration. So heavy, it's tiring as hell, no joke. First, I have to train my physical strength and muscles. Who knows how much this damn sword weighs? Looking at the door leading out of the rooftop, which had been closed for a year, Young thought to himself, if I want to run, I have to show my face on the street. What street? I haven't even gone downstairs in 2 years. Thinking about it, he suddenly felt creeped out. The young man decided that since he didn't have the strength to run now, he'd do it later. Next time, I'll definitely run. He clenched the sword again, wanting to lift it one more time, wondering to himself, in the memory I got from the other day, I was a 12-year-old kid. How did I have the ability to lift a sword and run continuously for almost an hour? He didn't know who he and the strange man in the memory were, but he kept hearing the mantra, eat and run again. Raising his determined eyes, an idea flashed through Si-young's mind. He found 2 belts, connected them to 2 parts of the sword, then tied a red cloth to wear both parts on his back. He had finally created a kind of device to carry the sword horizontally without using his hands. He let out a speculative breath, thinking to himself, how many push-ups did I used to do? I think I couldn't even do 30. Now just carrying the sword on my back, I already feel so shaky that my 2 legs can't handle it. His head started spinning. He calculated, I haven't exercised in a long time, and now I have to carry a sword. Can I do about 10 push-ups now? I have to try to find out. The young man put his hands on the rooftop floor, and before he even lowered his body, he was already trembling like a broken washing machine. Damn, I already feel tired as hell. All right, let's try one demo. The young man tensed his body, mumbling, 1-1. But why was this one taking so long? His body hadn't even gone down far, and he already felt a terrible tremor from his muscles protesting. He slammed his face straight into the rooftop floor with a huff, then just lay there motionless. Damn it. He said he was about to do 2, but in reality he couldn't even do half a 1. Phew, with his butt in the air. Si-young pushed up his flat stomach, thinking, just this for the first day should be enough. However, when he saw his stomach, it started grumbling as if protesting, so the young man temporarily abandoned his training and went inside to slurp down 3 or 4 boxes of instant noodles, plus some other things. After just 1 session, his stomach was already rumbling. He sat up again, telling himself he would eat a lot of rice. When the sun set, he slung the sword back on his back with full determination. I have to try something new. He let out a breath, aiming for the rooftop door that hadn't been opened in a very long time. I have to run. There probably aren't many people around this area now. First, on the fourth floor, there was no one. He thought about running up and down the stairs first. It's too dangerous outside now. Not to mention the young man is also carrying a huge sword on his back. One step down the stairs was a trembling step. He thought he would run until he was tired. But after just 10 steps, he felt himself swaying like a tree in the wind. He panted in and out a few times. And Si-young felt that after just going down one floor, his body was about to break in two, because he couldn't control his strength when the tip of the sword touched the stair railing. The young man tumbled a few times down the stairs below, so without having to step, he still finished one section of the stairs with his butt pointing up to the sky. It hurts like hell. He gritted his teeth, feeling tears welling up, then found a way to flip himself back over. He was so indescribably angry that he decided he would run no matter what at all costs. At all costs, you hear me. And so Si-young carried the sword going up and down and up with his heavy breaths. He kept counting 1, 2, 3, 4, then 4, 3, 2, 1. Finally, when he returned to the rooftop, he shouted loudly, signaling that he had finished his task. Propping his hands on his two trembling thighs, he told himself, I just finished 4 rounds. It was so damn tiring. Tears, snot, and drool ran all over the place. If he had to train until he was exhausted, would the 8 haunting faces from his dreams disappear? He felt they were still weighing heavily on his mind. Then the image of his parents self-immolating in the square flooded back into Si-young's mind. He was angry, he was furious, he was bitter. He gritted his teeth, tightened the homemade belt on his shoulder, and turned to walk. I have to do it one more time. A few weeks later, on the first floor of the apartment building, a pile of garbage appeared overnight, making people think that the garbage from the entire neighborhood had been dumped there. The owner of that pile of garbage on the attic floor acted as if he didn't know sleeping until the sun was high in the sky, still snoring away. Si-young only woke up when the phone next to him buzzed violently. He was now used to having this thunder god sword by his side. He even hugged it to sleep like a teddy bear. He groaned a few times, feeling very tired. As soon as he woke up, his stomach rumbled loudly, so damn hungry. Since throwing out all the garbage, Si-young had returned to cooking like a normal person. He cooked and ate at the same time, but why did he always feel so hungry? Cooking for one person, yet the dishes piled up into a small mountain. After eating, Si-young went out to the rooftop to do push-ups with the sword on his back. However, now his ups and downs seemed more powerful than before, because his arms had clearly developed muscles to help him do push-ups. He reached number 70. He counted 71 to 75. Before he knew it, he was at 76. Sweat poured down his arms, which seemed to have grown in size since he started. At 98, he was already feeling it. The young man still tried for 99 and finally 100 before collapsing to the ground to rest. So damn tiring. Every training session was like torture, but for 4 weeks, Si-young had not stopped for a single day. Suddenly, a familiar whisper in his ear. The more you think, the tougher your skin and muscles will become. At that, the young man sat up immediately, propped the sword on the ground, and listened to the person's teaching. In enthusiasm, I find composure. In pain, I find joy. He thought it was right. I must continue. I can't let time pass by anymore. As evening fell, the area outside, the building was sparsely populated. Si-young's footsteps thundered on the familiar stairs, still carrying the sword, but his body had regained its balance, no longer wobbly as before. He ran down one flight of stairs without resting. When he ran up, his steps were still thundering with the same initial strength. By the time he slid onto the rooftop after completing the whole thing, Si-young was drenched in sweat as if he had taken a bath. He knew he had finished 8 floors, and after that, what's next? He glanced at the sword behind him as if asking for its opinion. Si-young drew it. Now with just one hand, he could lift the sword higher than 90 degrees. However, to swing this thing smoothly, he needed to use both hands. He gripped the hilt tightly, hearing that person's voice whisper, "Swing the sword gently until you've done it 100 times, then stop." He stood it up straight. Do it slowly, but with quality. So slow that anyone watching would have to yawn, but it was fine, as long as it was steady and in the correct order. Si-young followed the person's words. Absolutely do not let the tip of the sword shake. His eyes never blinked, as the sword's path cut through the air incredibly slow, yet steady. Sweat poured down like rain, but his arm never stopped. He heard the person ask, "Why do you have to go to this extent?" He asked back. The reason. He continued to swing the sword without stopping, not knowing how many tens of times he had swung it. He heard the voice on the other side ask again, faintly, "What is your goal?" He had never thought about his goal while training his body, but now that the question was put before him, Se-young could answer clearly and loudly. Revenge, I want revenge. Sitting in front of a blank white screen, Se-young's mind thought of the desolate scene of the village in blazing flames. This seemed to be a place from ancient times where many people had died at the same time, with images from the video of a passerby filming his parents' self-immolation in the square intertwining. It was at this moment that the question from the person inside Se-young's head continuously urged, "What is your goal, huh?" He hugged his knees, sitting in front of the screen, sobbing, just like the image of the stranger in the past, embracing his loved one and crying his eyes out in the middle of the burning village. The goal then and now was all the same, just two words: revenge. It was another terrible dream that had just visited. Young opened his eyes and saw the light of the electric lamp shining emotionlessly on his tear-streaked face. He stretched and sat up, saw a few teardrops run down his shirt. Young quickly wiped them away. The sadness that had just appeared immediately turned into a mixture of hatred and resentment. Outside on the rooftop were the high heels of Kim Bora, who was tiptoeing closer to his door. When she reached it, she took out her phone and texted the kid, "Do you remember today is the checkup day? We'll meet in an hour." Then she giggled to herself clearly, planning to play the "I texted the wrong person" trick again, like last time. Unexpectedly, she heard the lock click open. Kim Bora was startled, thinking she was a thief. In front of her was the messy-haired kid staring at her through his tangled hair. Suddenly she felt her legs freeze and asked, "How did you know I was here?" The boy replied with a completely unrelated sentence, "I want to live more responsibly." That suddenly ruined the fun. But then again, when did Se-young not ruin Bora's fun? Her pouty expression made the boy sigh, and a little later they had to start the regular checkup. First was measuring blood pressure. Next, Bora asked, "How is your hand?" Still the same old answer, he said, "It's a little uncomfortable," which made Bora angry enough to call out his full name. "Hey, tak Se-young, Dr. Nana, and I discussed this before, but this time it's different, isn't it?" She seriously told the boy that the ligaments in his hands and feet were fine, but what about your back? Yet Se-young still replied indifferently, "It's still a little uncomfortable," which made green veins pop on the nurse's forehead. What a hateful kid. In short, what now? She sat up and pointed at Se-young, wanting to know what he was planning. "The doctor just said that there's nothing wrong with your body anymore." As expected when it came to this, Se-young showed a little interest, so she asked directly, "What are you going to do from now on? No more skipping school, okay?" She chattered on, not noticing Se-young's right hand clenching into a fist. "A 17-year-old like you, how can you go back to the 8th grade? You'll be the old man in the class. If you go to school, go to a good one. Make new friends. Don't let yourself get bullied. But who would bully you?" While she was rambling, she suddenly saw the boy close to her. Bora's voice got stuck in her throat when she saw Se-young very close to her with a very strange, menacing look. He stared at the nurse without blinking and said, "I'm not going to school," with a completely different attitude than usual, which made Bora stare blankly for a moment. She asked, "What's wrong?" But the other side just replied with the same sentence. "You just heard me, didn't you?" He called her full name, Tak Se-young. He was already very wary, afraid that she would force him to go to school. Suddenly the nurse sat up and yelled, "When did you get so tall? You weren't even 1.6 meters before I'm 168 meters tall, and now you're even taller than me. Wait, stand up properly." Adjusting Se-young's posture, Bora looked at him like a strange creature, wondering, how did I only just notice? She looked down at his muscles. Now that I think about it, has this kid been exercising lately? He suddenly grew so much. Kids really do grow up fast. But this is strange. She was about to touch him, but unexpectedly she touched the kid's firm muscles, and then squeezed his 2 thighs, looking exactly like an older sister craving young boys. Bora giggled and asked, "Have you become a muscular man?" In the afternoon, when the nurse left, he finally had time to practice with the sword on the rooftop. If you are determined to become strong, you must have overwhelming power. That voice was like telling a daily story to Se-young. Small things will determine the strong and the weak in a crowd. He swung his sword with every word of that person to distinguish between high and low. It seems that the sky, the earth, and the sun are different things, but no, they are all one. Therefore, there is no need to fight for dominance. He spun the huge sword vertically in front of him. Now his muscles were strong enough to comfortably lift this sword up and down, reflecting on his current self. Se-young had an unyielding commitment, the blessing of the sword, plus the essence of faith. After a very long time of training with this thunder god sword, The unyielding vow obtained through training the body to the point of exhaustion was also the first power Si Young obtained by swinging this sword 10,000 times with each hand without rest. He finally achieved the blessing of the sword. And when those two things belonged to him, the essence of faith, one of the hardest types of power to find, was generated in his body. Those three things sounded strange, but that was what Si Young had remembered from the memory he had from the first day. He wondered if it was his memory or not. It could be, if, so then my current level is nothing compared to myself. In the past, I need more. Every day, Si Young felt a boiling desire to seek more power for himself, so now he had only one thought: I must train more. Time passed slowly until a year later. The central city hadn't changed much, but that day, everyone passing by the shopping malls looked up to watch the news because today was one of the country's most important days, the day a new president was successfully elected. Above the words, Jang Sung-chul gives a speech after being elected as the 21st president of the country. He was swearing, promising, and ensuring he would meet the people's expectations. At the train stations in Seoul, people hung banners congratulating him on becoming president. All the newspapers that day reported Jang Sung-chul's speech. From now on, I will represent the ideals of the party to fight against anyone who intends to resist. After finishing his speech on television, Sung-chul went to shake hands with a former subordinate. He laughed heartily. I became president to contribute to this country. This is all just the beginning. Jang Sung-chul, a former member of the Barunjeon law firm, had been elected the 21st president. So many people flocked to him. While they were talking happily, a subordinate came over and whispered, Director Lee of the Shinjin Group is on the line. While they were talking happily, a subordinate came over and whispered, Director Lee of the Shinjin Group is on the line. As soon as he picked up, he heard congratulations. Congratulations, Mr. Jang. Sung-chul was very happy, thanking the person on the other end and inviting him to a family gathering. Most importantly, the kids have had a hard time in the U.S. for so long, it's time for them to come back. These heartfelt words fell clearly into Si Young's ears, just like with every other president. As soon as he came to power, Sung-chul declared he would not overlook any support and would increasingly raise the people's expectations. After exchanging a few more pleasantries with the chairman of the Shinjin Group, he hung up, just as his secretary came in to ask, Is Soo-jung coming back soon? Hearing his daughter's name, he smiled and nodded. That's right, she suffered a lot and the kids have all grown up. The secretary, who had been with him for a long time, continuously congratulated him. Mr. President, you have suffered a lot. Finally, you have the desired result. He confidently taught. There's a saying, after the rain, the sky clears. So when our children have gone through difficulties, we parents need to join forces to do things like this, right? Seeing the secretary nod and say, Yes, sir, he looked up at the sky and laughed heartily. When power was concentrated in his hands like this, Sung-chul felt he could do many more things. No one could stop him and his family from achieving what they wanted. A few days later at Incheon International Airport, it was packed with people. The international arrivals gate that day had a few figures in menacing black clothes, so there were fewer people than usual. It was all to protect the three figures walking behind. The sound of their shoes echoed on the tiled floor. A girl with blue-dyed hair walked between two young men. As soon as they set foot on the ground, they heard someone call out Yoo-jin and Soo-hoo and Jun-hyuk too. In front of them were three young men waving their hands enthusiastically, acting very familiar. And indeed, they all knew each other. At first, they were a bit hesitant about their changed appearances, but then she slowly read out the names Hee-jun, Chang-soo, and Da-hoon right. Some were indifferent, some were excited to see their old friends return, so they needed a grand welcome. Deeply moved, they laughed and greeted each other. Long time no see. However, there wasn't much to say to each other. After the polite inquiries, suddenly the atmosphere froze, and Hee-jun asked the blue-haired girl, Why didn't Soo-hyun and Soo-jung come back with you? Hearing those two names, Yoo-jin suddenly got annoyed. She said, I don't know. Soo-jung wanted to go to Japan, said she wanted to clear her head. And Soo-hyun, have you heard anything? Mentioning her friend's name, she acted playfully, but Jun-hyuk didn't seem to care much. Just finding it annoying. We've been on a break for 2 years. What more is there to take a break from? It's just a pain for his lackeys. So with each person saying a word, they quickly left the airport's arrival area. 4 of them walked and talked, while Jun-hyuk and Chang-soo deliberately lagged behind to talk more. Frowning under his white hair, Jun-hyuk whispered, Have you found out anything yet? Hearing him say yes, he immediately put his hand on his shoulder and said, Good job. Thinking that was it, Chang-Su's sinister smile widened on his face. The blonde-haired guy bowed his head and whispered, "Hey, you have a plan, right?" He immediately got a wicked smile from the guy next to him, a trademark that hadn't changed in years. He said, "Of course. Because of whom did we end up in this state?" A woman's voice came from the other end of the phone, extremely worried. "Si-younga, are you really not going to school?" Hearing him say no, his aunt wanted to convince him further. "You can't just keep going on like this." It was just that Si-young wasn't ready to go back to school, so his aunt didn't know what else to say. "How about you come to my place?" His aunt was in faraway America, and the world around was too scary for Si-young right now. He didn't say it out loud, but just pretended to refuse, knowing that for the time being he couldn't persuade his nephew. His aunt's voice became softer on the other end. "I'm sorry. I was afraid that if I pushed my nephew too much, he would think bad thoughts." After saying a few more words, Hirin was about to hang up. It was just because she was worried about Si-young that she kept calling and urging him. He closed his eyes, took out the sword that had been his companion for a whole year, and caressed it for a while, like a pet, his heart filled with hatred. Si-young thought to himself, "You all just wait. I will crush every single one of you into dust." Outside his building, a pair of shiny leather shoes suddenly appeared. A man in a suit looked up and reported to someone on the other end of the line, "Yes, I'm here." He barely goes out. "I've had people monitoring the area around this building during the day, but he still hasn't appeared." According to him, he had tried mobilizing delivery drivers, couriers, and meter readers, but still couldn't verify anything inside this building. If you didn't know beforehand, no one would know that the owner was living here. The expensive car sped from the airport on the highway, and Jun-hyuk's surprised voice rang out. "What did you say, he never leaves the house?" Hearing Chang-Su say it seemed to be true, Jun-hyuk still didn't believe it, and kept demanding the latest picture of him, but he never went out, so how could he demand a picture? Chang-Su got annoyed and asked back, and all Jun-hyuk had in his hand right now was a picture of Se-young looking as frail as a skeleton in the hospital. That bastard refused to go to school and wouldn't even go out, so we can't know how he's living now. Can we? Chang-Su asked the silver-haired guy next to him. "Do you think we should tell the uncles to storm his house? Just kick down the door and drag him out for a beating?" Seeing Jun-hyuk's dazed expression, Chang-Su vaguely asked again, "Is that not allowed or something?" Which made his friend laugh out loud as if he had heard something funny. He put his arm around Chang-Su's shoulder and laughed with delight, as if he had just watched a comedy. Then seeing his blonde friend's face, he turned away to explain, "You can't do that. To do that, you at least have to be on the level of that guy, Soo-hyun." "Why bring him up all of a sudden?" Chang-Su asked in surprise and immediately saw the silver-haired guy's cunning eyes. "Did you think Soo-hyun just went to Japan for fun?" He obviously didn't know and just stared, which made Jun-hyuk very pleased. He grinned, and then his face gradually distorted into a sinister expression, because that Lee Soo-hyun guy was invited to Japan to become a yakuza. What? Thinking it was only in movies, seeing Chang-Su's horrified face, Jun-hyuk was very pleased and slowly explained he and Soo-jung know a few friends in America whose parents are yakuza. When he got on the plane, Soo-hyun said, "I have to give that bastard a gift, don't I?" That was also Jun-hyuk's favorite phrase. Who among them here didn't want to teach that guy a lesson? That night, opening social media, what caught Si-young's eye was a picture of the group that had bullied him in the past, gathering after returning to the country. He clenched the green phone in his hand, wanting to crush it. Every word below, filled with joy, was hitting his eyes. "We finally met Soo-hyun, Soo-jung, let's meet up soon." He slammed the phone down, used both hands to zoom in on the picture, then scrolled down, with a gloomy expression, no different from someone from the underworld. "There's someone here waiting for you all too." At Narita International Airport in Japan, two Koreans appeared smiling and talking to each other. "I thought we'd have to wait another year or two to come back. But I didn't expect Soo-jung's father to have such a big influence as soon as he became president, changing the whole situation." Opposite the pair of young man and woman was another pair smiling as if they had known each other for a long time. It was Soo-hyun and Soo-jung who had just landed. A car was already waiting for them. Now meeting familiar faces again, they continued their stories, which had many details that needed to be discussed. Lee Soo-hyun was the son of Lee Jo-yang, the chairman of the Shinjin Group, one of the closest people to Kang Soo-jung's father, the 21st president of South Korea. A long new limousine took everyone from the airport. It was designed with a separate room for 4 people to sit opposite each other and talk. They said they didn't want to waste time, so they got straight to the point, the thing everyone looked forward to every time they came back to the country. Daehoon spoke first, since the news of Soohyun and Soojung coming to Japan was released. My older brother has arranged everything. Smiling brightly, Soohyun said thanks, but the curly-haired guy in the corner laughed smugly and said, I'm the one who should be thankful, right? His sly eyes darted back and forth, filled with desire, looking at Soojung. Who would have imagined that I'd get to know Soojung, the daughter of the current president of South Korea, while studying abroad in America? Suddenly hearing her name mentioned, she was very happy to thank him. I won't forget what you did to help me. Hearing the beautiful girl say that, he smiled triumphantly. Friends should do that for each other. My father, who is the head of the triad, pays a lot of attention to these things. The thing everyone knew was what it was. The 4 of them looked at each other, each with a different expression, and then Soojung spoke first. If everything is okay, then we'll leave here tomorrow, right? Daehoon suggested, why don't we stay here and relax for a bit, and then we can go back to Korea whenever we want. The girl sitting next to him, just waiting for that, giggled, which made Soohyun feel something strange. The 2 of them burst out laughing. Why do you guys look so surprised? It's so cute. The vague words made Soojung extremely dissatisfied. If you have something to say, just spit it out. You called us here for something, right? He mumbled, there are a few people waiting in Busan signaling to get to business right away. We can meet whenever. So Soohyung wanted to know what this kid was planning, but there was nothing special. He smiled and said, I told them that you guys wanted to clean up the mess yourselves, so for now you can just consider these people as your subordinates to order around. Hearing that, Soohyung burst out laughing. You're so annoying. Why didn't you just say that from the beginning, instead of being so vague? Just then, the phone in Soohyun's pocket vibrated. Who would know the exact time he landed at the airport to call? He took out his phone, and after just a 2-second glance, his eyebrows furrowed in anger, making Soohyung next to him glance over to see. As soon as she read it, the girl got just as angry as her friend. Someone using an unsaved number texted playfully, I played with that toy before I was waiting for you guys to get bored of it. Sorry. That night on a deserted road, empty because it was midnight, 2 thugs were driving their car towards Si-young's neighborhood, complaining to each other about having to work at this hour. The bald one told the one with hair to be quiet. Whatever you do it quietly. This only made the guy more furious, and he cursed loudly. Do you have any idea why you and I were sent to do this? To handle a kid who hasn't even finished middle school. Do you think it's something special? Pointing at a random building on the side of the road, the guy with the headband angrily called his accomplice's name. Look, so many ordinary people are living here. It's almost 12 o'clock in 5 minutes and they've all turned off their lights. The only light around here is from the headlights of this black car. They hadn't planned yet. They were just starting to think about what they should do. But the guy with hair quickly leaned out of his seat, wanting to go alone right away. He left the bald one still not understanding why the 2 of them weren't acting together. He leaned out of the car window as if he had to explain to an idiot. We're just gonna beat up a middle school kid. Do both of us really have to go? But that wasn't right either, because it was a mission for both of them. After some back and forth, the guy with hair went crazy and yelled right in his accomplice's face. Do you think I need someone to watch me beat up that kid? The more he thought, the angrier he got. He didn't know why he was sent to deal with that kid. That guy was determined to bring that middle school kid back and beat him to a pulp just to vent his anger. His accomplice didn't care much, scratching his face and letting the guy with hair go into Si-young's building alone to do the deed. He easily picked the lock on the lower floor, walked step by step up to the apartment floor, and then broke the lock on the door leading to the rooftop. He just pushed it open naturally, as if it were his own house. As soon as he stepped in, he felt very uncomfortable seeing the patchy grass on the rooftop. It felt like no one lived here. He didn't know if coming here was a waste of time. He put his hands in his pockets, walked slowly towards the attic room, muttering curses. What kind of house doesn't even have a single window? Suddenly, he remembered from the photo he received that there was a window on the roof, just not on his side. He was licking his lips, about to find a way to break in through the window, when he suddenly heard the big door next to him click as someone unlocked it from the inside. Suddenly, it creaked open in front of the curly-haired guy. Much to his surprise, he walked right in, with the door open. Like this, it would be a waste not to go in. It was too dark to see anything, but from inside, a pair of glittering eyes were staring at him like a predator waiting for its prey to fall into a trap. It had been an hour and 5 minutes, and the bald guy still hadn't seen his accomplice come out. He didn't know how many cigarettes he had smoked. He angrily stomped his way into the building up to Si Young's building. The motion sensor lights in the hallway turned on from the first floor to the second, then the third and fourth. The bald guy had appeared on the rooftop of Si Young's building where the room door was already open as if in welcome. Seeing the door open meant his accomplice had met the target. He scratched his bald head thinking, "What the hell is that idiot doing telling me to go catch someone?" He barged through the door about to open his mouth to curse, when suddenly a hand shot out from the darkness and grabbed his face like grabbing a toy. There was no way to resist. The bald guy's entire body was dragged into the house. He looked so big, yet he was dragged away without a single struggle. Soon there was no sound at all on the rooftop outside. The ownerless car sat there until the next morning. By the time the police came to investigate, it was 9 a.m. The male police officer stuck a parking ticket on the car and was about to call for it to be towed away immediately. The police thought it was normal not to have anyone come to claim it. These types of rental car drivers, every time they were called to pay a fine, would just say it wasn't their car. Hopefully this car's owner information was in the system so they could be called. A police officer spoke up asking his colleague, "Do you know this building is under our special surveillance?" Of course, the man didn't know he had just joined the force not long ago. To put it simply, the order from the higher-ups of the higher-ups is for us to check this place regularly, so you should pay a little attention too. Time passed heavily in a building in downtown Seoul. The phone in Chang-Soo's hand received a text message from a strange number. "I heard about what Jun-hyuk did." "Tell me about it, friend." Jun-hyuk, sitting not far away, asked. "What's going on?" "It's already 11 o'clock and there's no damn news." He was getting impatient and cursed out loud, but Chang-Soo had no information to give back. "Because they haven't called me." "How would I know?" Jun-hyuk started acting cocky. "Forget about those three. Let them all die." What a bunch of idiots. Chang-Soo didn't know what to say. He looked around, waiting for several hours with no response at all. Finally, he called another person who was currently at work. The fat hand that picked up the phone heard a faint voice introduce himself. "This is Chang-Soo." Choi Jong-chan immediately greeted him with a welcoming smile. "Ah, Chang-Soo, your boys are doing a good job, right?" Hearing Chang-Soo's hesitant voice say, "I still haven't heard anything from them," he quickly turned his chair around and asked back immediately, "What the hell are they doing that's taking so long?" Chang-Soo didn't know either, so he guessed, "Maybe the guys you sent are all amateurs." Suddenly he got angry. "Amateurs my ass. They're all gangsters who beat people up without batting an eye, and you look down on them like that." Jong-chan didn't want to say more, just simply said, "Wait, let me check and call you back, okay?" The kid on the other end of the line kept rambling that he was in a hurry. He took his frustration out on him. "I knew this stupid thing would happen. I should have just called Uncle Chang-hyun from the beginning." The words made Jong-chan angry, but he still had to try to placate Chang-Soo. Hearing only a toot-toot from the other end because the other party had hung up, he clenched his phone in his hand, muttering curses. "You son of a bitch. I let you talk to me like that only because you're my boss's son." Gritting his teeth in anger, he finally couldn't hold it in anymore and yelled, "Damn it! What a bunch of bastards!" The phones of the two men Jong-chan had sent were vibrating violently on the floor, not both at once, but one after the other. As for their owners, they were lying twisted in strange positions on the wooden floor. After being beaten to a pulp, their eyes, nose, and mouth all mixed up, impossible to tell which was which. Wearing his familiar loose pants, Si Young walked over to look at them to see if they were still conscious or dreaming, with a truly intimidating expression. If they were still conscious, he might just beat them to death. At Incheon International Airport. At the special exit, Soo-jung and Soo-hyun were clacking their shoes on the stone floor. As soon as they got outside, they heard a female voice call Soo-jung-ah. It was a woman in a suit bowing to her, but clearly the two didn't know each other. She simply said, "I'm Nam Ho-jung from the president's security detail," meaning she was one of her father's people. "I have to come." Soo-jung didn't ask for any more reason, but just put on an annoyed expression, about to protest when she suddenly heard a low male voice nearby call Soo-hyun. Who was it that could make him stop so unhappily? The middle-aged man in the elegant suit was Teacher Yang, smiling at him. "It's been a long time, hasn't it?" Soo-jung's hand was grabbed, and the female bodyguard dragged her away. "Miss, leave here immediately, because your father has ordered me to take you to see him as soon as you land at the airport." She looked back at Soo-hyun as if to say something more, but he didn't say a word. Ho-jung just led the young lady past Teacher Yang, leaving the two men, one young and one old, at the deserted airport. At the credit company's office, a call came in, and the other end immediately started cursing, "Hey, you son of a bitch!" As soon as he heard the voice, he knew it was the chairman. The person who answered the phone sounded calm, but Jong-chan on the other end was going crazy. "The job I told you guys to handle yesterday, how's it going? Go drag those bastards back here right now for me." He was at a loss, not understanding what the chairman on the other end was talking about. He put the phone down vaguely, guessing these bastards must have gone crazy and run off somewhere. He was Yeom Dong-suk, the second department head of Mira Credit Company. He now had to call his subordinates to ask about the two guys who were sent to see Young's building yesterday. Why haven't they reported back yet, and no one knows where they are? No one has seen them come home either. What's going on? Dong-suk found it strange and drove to park right below Si Young's building. He got out of his car, which was the same color as the suit he was wearing, looked around, and then asked one of his subordinates who had driven him down, "Is this the right place?" He said it was. Dong-suk looked up, wondering, what the hell happened to those two guys? Maybe they were both drunk, and that's why they didn't answer their phones. Suddenly he saw a parking ticket stuck at the foot of the building and went over to take a look. The text was a bit small, so he had to squint to read it. The license plate number was very familiar. It was the car his company had provided to those two idiots. What else could it be? That means they came here, so why can't I reach them? The parking ticket said 10:20 this morning was the time the car was towed. So from then until the car was towed, what the hell were they doing? Jong-chan stomped down the hallway furious. He walked, trying to contain his rage, until he reached Yeom Dong-suk's room, burst the door open and rushed in cursing, "Hey, you bastard!" There was no Dong-suk in the room, only a guy who looked like an addict smoking. He glanced over and saw it was the director and was so startled that before he could bow, he saw him fuming with anger, which made the guy cringe and ask, "Director, what brings you here?" He just wanted to know why the room was so empty. Where did all those bastards go? The addict-looking guy trembled like a leaf and stammered, "The department head ordered everyone to gather. They're on their way there now." On their way where Jong-chan didn't know. It was only when he heard Si Young's building that he paused. Isn't that where the two thugs were sent last night? That afternoon, Dong-suk finally called Jong-chan. Before he could say anything, he heard the man's voice cursing from the other end. "You bastard! Where have you been all this time? Why didn't you answer your phone?" Dong-suk was too used to this kind of scolding to talk back, just quietly replied, "It seems a problem has arisen." Only then did old Jong-chan start to calm down and listen. Hearing Dong-suk's cautious voice on the other end report, "The two people we sent have gone missing." The old man fell silent, becoming very calm and calculating as he heard his subordinate report. "I feel like there's something not right with this Si Young building. So that's why you gathered all those kids there, huh?" He immediately got confirmation from Dong-suk. "I have to get to the bottom of this. This sounds serious." Jong-chan stopped cursing and just agreed with a single, "Okay?" He heard his subordinate thank him on the other end, and then hung up with a click. He hadn't been standing for long when his subordinates came to greet him. "Boss." Dong-suk gently turned his head and asked, "Is everyone here?" They all shouted in unison, "Yes, sir, boss." Then they followed Dong-suk into the building, each one looking as menacing as a gangster. About 20 of them rushed into the small corridor of the building leading up to the attic room. Starting from the 4th floor, they had spread out all over the stairs. Dong-suk took a drag from his cigarette before starting to work. Seeing the time was right, he ordered, "Get him." The first guy used his leg to kick open the door leading to the rooftop, slamming it against the wall with a loud bang. Then they followed each other, running thunderously across the artificial grass of the rooftop, creating a gap for the others to continue rushing up. Dong-suk was left alone below, puffing on his cigarette, waiting for his subordinates to finish the job. Very quickly he heard the sound of punches and thuds from above. Thinking that things had started, he leisurely walked up the stairs. The sound of fighting got louder and louder. "By the time I get there, that kid will probably be a pile of mush." Before he reached the rooftop, he heard the fighting stop completely. Dong-suk guessed it was over, thinking he had been worrying too much. Suddenly a figure flew out right in front of his eyes. It was a person beaten to a pulp, their body embedded in the concrete wall behind them. The helmet on their head shattered into several lifeless plastic pieces. Dong-suk watched the guy fall to one side, only then realizing with horror that it was his subordinate, not the middle school kid they were supposed to catch. He started to get scared, swallowing hard and asking, "What's going on? How can this be?" Someone's footsteps stomped menacingly on the ground. From behind the rooftop door, it was a giant figure so large it blocked out the light. Dong-suk was so scared he fell on his butt, crawling backward, stammering, "Who are you?" His scream was a complete contrast to the strange calmness on the giant's face. Se-young kicked straight at the gangster's face, punching with his bare hands with a resounding impact as if using a heavy weapon. That afternoon, the police were called to take information from the residents of Se-young's building. "I heard screaming and some gangsters going in there," the nosy curly-haired woman whispered to the police. "I've been so scared lately, I can't sleep well." After taking down her statement, he closed his notebook and told her, "Wait a moment, we'll go in and verify right now." The two police officers walked together, muttering, "Why didn't they report it right away when they heard the screaming?" He also said that if anyone who looked like a thug came, they should just close the door and ignore it. He didn't understand why they reported it this time. The other person thought it was normal because she hadn't been able to sleep lately. The thugs were screaming so loudly. When they reached the stairs leading to the rooftop, they discovered the door was already open. It wasn't like what she said that it had been locked all this time, but anyway, it saved them the trouble. The two of them walked straight up the stairs and found the lock here had been broken in a very crude way. Clearly someone broke in illegally. He quickly called his colleague over to take a look. They realized the seriousness of the situation and asked each other, "So we have to investigate, right?" They went up to the rooftop and banged on the door to the balcony, repeatedly urging whoever was inside to open up. "Someone has filed a report, so we request your cooperation." Not long after they heard the sound of the doorknob turning with a click. They immediately backed away when they saw the person's large figure. Looking all the way up, they could only see the doorframe cutting across his neck, not his face. Se-young loomed before the two police officers, no different from a giant with a very intimidating mane of hair. They screamed, "Freeze, don't move!" One of them saw the scene behind Se-young's back, and his face turned pale. He raised his gun and pointed it at him with an urgency as if he had seen a danger in front of him. His colleague, not knowing what was going on, turned around in alarm and asked, "What's wrong?" He saw the other person stammering as if he was very scared, saying something about behind you. He tilted his head to see what was behind him, but when he saw it, he screamed, "Oh my God!" A look of shock mixed with horror appeared in the police officer's eyes because the entire gang of gangsters was piled on top of each other, covered in blood, spread all over the rooftop. They hesitated. Are those real people? They looked at the giant in front of them. The two police officers felt their testicles shrink. Don't look at people with such a scary expression. Okay? The police were quickly assembled in front of Se-young's house, along with ambulances making the whole neighborhood resound with sirens. They slowly entered and then gradually brought people out. Not far away was Jong-chan's four-wheeled car, which had just arrived. The window hadn't even been rolled down yet, and his pale face could be seen inside with a single question. Why is it like this? When he saw the blood-soaked, battered people being carried out by medical staff, it seemed no one had escaped. At that time, the police on the rooftop were still being given the runaround by Se-young with questions about his identity. He just kept repeating, "I don't have a resident registration number," which made the police officer want to get angry, thinking this young man was determined not to cooperate. He lowered his voice and called out, "Hey, police officer," which was enough to scare him to death. He had to force himself to ask back, "What? How?" Who would have thought this giant would say, "I'm 18 this year, so I don't have a resident registration number. My name is Tak Se-young, a student at Nungwang Middle School. I dropped out in the 8th grade. As for the reason, there was no need to say it. And even if he did, he couldn't, because his lips were tightly pursed in pain. His colleague in the back was calling to report to the boss. He says his name is Tak Se-young. He immediately received the order to withdraw from there right away, repeating over and over on the phone with the chief that Tak Se-young is only 18 years old and is already almost 2 meters tall. Clearly there's something strange, but he asked back, "So what?" He reminded the police officer that he broke their arms and legs, slashed them with a knife. He's not a normal teenager, don't you understand? The chief's voice continued to be impatient, reminding his subordinate to listen. And the incident happened inside his house, not outside. If you touch him, reporters from all over Korea will hound you relentlessly. Can you handle that? If the chief said he couldn't handle it, how could his subordinate dare to say yes? Finally, he hung up with a grit of his teeth, which made his colleague in the back have to whisper, "What did he say?" The police officer turned around and said, "Withdraw from here right away." And so the two of them just left Se-young and left right away. He wasn't in the mood to keep guests either. A little later, he picked up the phone and said to the other end, I'm going to the US. Hearing her nephew decide on what she had been wishing for so long, his aunt smiled happily and asked back, "Really?" On the other end, Si-young smiled, but as soon as he heard his aunt say she would talk to his uncle, he said, "No, it's okay. You don't have to tell him right away because I want to go, but that doesn't mean right now." "What does that mean?" On the other end, Si-young said, "I want to travel for about a year." He said this to his aunt while looking at the giant sword slung at his side. "You're still so young and foreign countries are so dangerous, so I want to travel all over Korea first." She worriedly reminded her nephew to remember that no matter what he wanted to do, he had to quickly go back to school. He's already too old compared to normal students. Si-young didn't object but just tightened his grip on the sword in his hand. He changed the subject, simply saying, "It's been a long time since I went out, so I just want to go here and there for a bit. That way I can calm down. I want to travel without any worries, so I won't contact you during this time." Since the boy was willing to go out, his aunt let out a sigh of relief and agreed, then reminded him, "Anyway, you have to keep in touch so I can be at ease." He tipped the sword to one side, hung up, and said goodbye to his aunt. But if she could see the look in his eyes now, she definitely wouldn't be at ease. Jun-hyuk had just managed to call Chang-soo when he started yelling into the phone to question him. "What's going on? It's been 2 days and still no news at all. Are you kidding me?" Hearing Chang-soo's excuse, "I tried to call them, but I couldn't get through." Jun-hyuk immediately yelled and cursed. "What did you say, you bastard? If you don't get your act together at this time, that Soo-hyun will step in and wipe your ass for you and then laugh in your face. Can't you even handle something as simple as that?" Hearing Jun-hyuk's angry voice curse. "You were so good at handling things like this in middle school, you bastard." Suddenly, Chang-soo felt deeply offended. He hadn't said anything, but the other end kept nagging. "I'm not talking to you anymore. Don't call me for now, understand?" Being discarded like a bag of trash, Chang-soo furiously threw his phone onto the bed, cursed for a while, and then rubbed his head and eyes in frustration. A little later, the phone vibrated violently again. The person he least wanted to hear from Lee Soo-hyun was now calling. In the end, he pressed answer, put it on speakerphone without picking it up. On the other end, it wasn't Soo-hyun, but another person's voice saying, "Soo-hyun wants to see you." He sat up immediately. Chang-soo wanted to know where it was so he could go, but the other person said, "Don't go yet, bring this with you." What the other person was talking about was unexpectedly a file on Si-young during his time in his attic apartment. At this point, Chang-soo even had to fake a laugh and tell Soo-hyun, "This is all the latest pictures of Si-young." In return, he got a suspicious look from him. "He lives in the attic room of the Si-young building. You couldn't get a picture of him or something." Chang-soo hated that look, but had to act like it was nothing, scratching his head and laughing. He didn't understand why these bastards all asked the same damn questions. Well then, Soo-hyun let out a breath and handed the documents to Soo-hoo. "Send this with the documents to the people in Jay's organization in Korea." Soo-young and her friend just glanced at each other and understood. "We'll be meeting them again soon, but without leaving any traces, especially since the current situation seems to be that we've underestimated this matter too much, which is why all these problems are happening now. The people from Joe or anyone else were all professionals, and they had the advantage of not being locals." Soo-hyun temporarily didn't trust anyone. Glancing at him, Soo-young knew it would be a look of resentment when he remembered the 2 dark years like hell. It definitely can't be repeated again. Chang-soo was silent. Suddenly his name was called, which startled him. Soo-hyun had gotten close to him at some point, pressing him. "Jun-hyuk told me he would play with those toys first. What does that mean?" Soo-hyun's unyielding eyes made Chang-soo have to avoid them and stammer, "I'm not sure either." But the next series of questions made Chang-soo sweat more and more. He said he didn't know and had no reason to lie to Soo-hyun. But this guy clearly didn't trust him and just kept asking. Suddenly, Soo-hyun's phone rang, cutting off the interrogation. The thugs reported they would drag that kid out and bring him here within an hour. So fast, Soo-young tilted her head in confusion. But Soo-hyun just heard that, and his face immediately broke into a grin. "If so, that's even better. We just have to wait, right?" The place they were at was a closed condominium complex, built with 2 frontages in the center of Seoul. They just had to sit here and wait for the toy to be delivered to their door. The person they sent was very quick to stop his black car under the Si-young building. 2 figures in elegant clothes got out of the car and spoke to each other in Japanese. "We've arrived." Bald one spoke to someone on the other end of the line, saying they would proceed immediately. They walked straight up to the rooftop without any hesitation, no matter how you looked at it. They looked like a pair of bosses, one bald with a strangely patterned suit along with a guy as big as a bear with muscles all over. The bald one reminded the person next to him, "Kenta, our target is a kid who's only 18 years old. But looking at the bloody battlefield in front of us, I think we shouldn't underestimate this." He raised his hand to warm up his joints a bit, and the bald one asked his friend if he wanted to start right away. Suddenly, that big hand was placed on his shoulder without a word, making the bald one have to turn back to look. "What's wrong?" Kenta's beast-like eyes stared intently at the attic room door, feeling something very terrible radiating from here. He concluded right away, "There's a beast in there," which made the bald one not understand at all. "A fierce dog. Why is it so quiet?" Hearing Kenta correct him, "Not a dog but a beast," the bald one didn't understand a thing. "There's no reason for a beast to be here. Is there a wolf inside in the middle of the city?" "Old man." Yet Kenta didn't laugh and even said, "It's possible," which made the bald one start to feel something strange. The two of them took cautious steps and then stopped right in front of the metal door, reminding each other, "We have to carry out the mission with utmost caution." He was warming up, swinging his arms and legs, preparing to go for a power move to kick the door open. When he saw it fly towards him, Si-young with just one punch had managed to blow the door away, crushing the person behind it against the metal fence behind. He was pressed against the mesh by the thick, heavy attic door, his bald head pushed into the mesh, only able to make ugh sounds. Kenta saw his colleague get punched like that right in front of his eyes and immediately went crazy, switching his target to the giant with all the muscles in front of him. But Si-young was also very quick to sense that this bald guy had another accomplice. He was like a giant bear swinging his fist at Si-young, yet he was hit straight in the face by him due to the height difference with a loud thud. It was as if he had used all his strength. Yet Kenta's blank white eyes couldn't believe that this kid didn't dodge, just took a direct punch to the face from him. His fist trembled on Si-young's face, and then he was horrified to realize that he was turning, to prepare to swing a powerful punch at the tanned face. His punch not only had the effect of hurting people, but also had the effect of shattering the rooftop floor. He held his muscular fist for a long moment, before lifting it, seeing the face of the wild bear from before, shrunken with a few front teeth outside, completely gone, nowhere to be seen. Blood splattered from him, adding to the dried bloodstains on the wall, making the scene at Si-young's feet look no different from hell. The bald one staggered, threw the metal door aside, intending to help Kenta beat this kid up. But unexpectedly he saw the scene of him being beaten to a pulp. And he himself was also facing a divine kick from Si-young. The Soo-hyun group had only been waiting for a little while, and had already lost patience, asking Takashi opposite them, "Why didn't you go with them?" With both hands in his pockets, looking very confident, he said, "Because it's not necessary. Those kids are the best of the best." Takashi of the Japanese triad was very proud, telling everyone to wait a little longer. There's nothing to worry about. Yet why did Soo-hyun have a strange feeling? A little later, the phone in Takashi's hand vibrated violently. Looking down, he saw Kenta's name written in Japanese. He frowned unhappily, brought the phone to his ear, and said with an annoyed tone, "Why are you calling me? I told you not to call unless there's a specific reason." He didn't hear Kenta's voice, but the voice of a young man on the other end. "So you're that Japanese guy, huh?" Takashi's voice dropped, wanting to know who the other person was. But he didn't expect to hear Kenta's voice screaming in agony under Si-young's massive foot. That was the sign that he had been defeated. The Kenta he knew was a thug who could handle anyone, even 1 against 3, yet now he was screaming like that. Takashi had to hold the phone away from him to avoid hearing the other guy's questioning voice, which sounded like it came from hell. "Where are you?" Not seeing the other end answer, he pulled hard on Kenta's chest, making him scream in unbearable pain. Takashi hung up immediately, regardless of what his subordinate on the other end was doing. A moment later, Si-young looked down at the bald guy in his car through the window and repeated the sentence he had said earlier. "You said it takes you 10 minutes to get from here to there. Right, I'll give you 5 minutes." Looking at Si-young's face, you could tell he wasn't joking. The bald guy's face was swollen, and he bit his teeth, not daring to make a sound. Si-young had a giant sword slung on his back. He closed the passenger side door, thinking he had spared the bald guy. But his firm hand squeezed the glass on the roof of the car and just ripped it off like a cheap toy. Si-young threw the cumbersome thing onto the road as if it had nothing to do with him, then threw the large Kenta into the back seat, then jumped into the car without opening the door, uttering a single sharp word to the bald guy. "Go." On the other side, Takashi had hung up his face, clearly showing worry, which made Soo-hyun anxiously ask back immediately, "What's going on over there?" After hesitating for a moment, he said, "Let's get out of here right now." All four of them were startled. What the hell is going on? Takashi could only say, "We have failed to ensure everyone's safety. Go back to your own homes." Soo-hyun frowned, questioning, "What do you mean, failed? There's no way you can't catch a little kid like that." Takashi's voice became urgent. "I don't have time to explain this now. We need to move to a safe place, and then I'll explain everything." Yet the four kids in front of him still hesitated, looking at Takashi as if he were a madman. He frowned and repeated, "For our own safety, we must leave this place immediately." Soo-hyun refused, repeating over and over, "Safety, safety! What damn safety? What's so dangerous that we have to leave here?" He roared as if going mad. "I almost laughed in your face. You failed at just bringing that kid here, and now you're talking about our damn safety." Before he could finish his sentence, everyone in the building heard countless panicked screams from outside. Takashi looked around worriedly. It must be him he's here. He was a professional after all. Indeed, Si-young had arrived below the tall building. He looked up. A few minutes earlier, the bald guy's car had taken Si-young, speeding through the main road to the two-fronted building in the center of Seoul. It swerved a few times before stopping with a screech, smoke billowing from the rear wheels, making people on the street think it was an action movie and gather around to watch. They murmured when they saw a large footstep onto the ground, and from there a very tall figure, different from a normal person, appeared. They took out their phones to take pictures, thinking it was the main character of some movie who had just appeared. He didn't turn his head, but the bald guy heard a clear question. Which floor? Not seeing any voluntary cooperation, Si-young had to look at the bald guy behind him. He put on a guilty look, not daring to look at Si-young's face, but still read out the number 8, 8th floor. He turned his head but didn't go, telling the bald guy to lead the way for him. Still not volunteering. Do you always have to wait for people to tell you what to do? The bald one, holding his swollen face, trembled and replied, "Yes, sir," and then went inside with him. The crowd of nosy people murmured and discussed. Where is a person that tall from? What is that sword? It must be a movie shoot. Suddenly the door behind the car fell off, or rather the entire left side of the car fell off the car, revealing Kenta's large body which had been crushed. Clearly, that's a real person, not a movie set. The crowd's faces turned pale, and when they realized the truth, they screamed, shaking the whole area. That was also the scream that the group of kids on the 8th floor heard. Soo-hyun wanted to know why there was screaming, but who could answer? Takashi waved his hand and said, "There are 3 stairs to escape from here." Soo-young glanced at her friend who was considered the leader of them all and asked, "Where do we go now? Although we don't know who that person is, it's clear he came here to find us and is still waiting below. If we have to choose one of the 3 stairs to go up, then his decision will be to split up to move safely." All 5 of them stared at him. If we split up like that, whoever runs into him will definitely get caught. Chang-soo pointed at Takashi and said, "Let's go down together. We have a bodyguard, right?" But the situation now was not what they thought. Soo-hyun lost his patience and ordered, "Whoever gets out, call the police. I don't care how you all split up." Soo-jung hugged Soo-hyun's arm tightly, determined to go with him. So he had to glance at Soo-hoo next to him and point to the stairs behind. "You go that way. And you, Chang-soo, go down the stairs on this side." He quickly pulled Soo-jung and called Takashi to go with him. He hesitated for a few seconds because those 2 were also clients who had signed a contract, but now there was no other way. He had to follow Soo-hyun's words. So the 5 of them split into 3 groups and ran for their lives. "Get out of here quickly." Chang-soo muttered curses. Damn it. But he also had to split up according to the original plan and escape from here. It was true that Si-young's foot had stepped on one of those 3 stairs. Who would be the unlucky one to meet him? Running frantically down the stairs below, Chang-soo ran and cursed. "That bastard Lee Soo-hyun told us to go together, but I didn't expect that after just going down 2 floors. He would see a large looming shadow waiting for him below with great horror. This is definitely not someone I can deal with." Rushing to follow Takashi, Soo-hyun asked, "Did you bring the documents? That's also very important." The exit was right in front of them, but just then they saw a pair of legs step forward and shout loudly, "Stop!" The whole group froze immediately, nervously waiting to see who was behind. Unexpectedly, it was a group of police officers pointing their handguns at them, wanting to know their identities. The hearts of the whole group seemed to stop at that moment. Each person showed a different expression of relief. But in the end, we're alive today. Soo-hyun would always remember this scene. Which bastard made me so scared? As for poor Chang-Su, he was slowly opening his eyes, hearing someone calling him. As soon as his consciousness returned, he saw his face pressed against the cold floor, his hands tied tightly behind his back, making it hard to move. In his ear, he heard someone's voice say, "Wake up." And when he looked over at the owner of that voice, it was a guy who looked incredibly muscular. Even a primary school student would know this guy was a tough one. He even had a beard and messy hair like a wild man. Who is this? Chang-Su couldn't make out the appearance under the thick hair. Suddenly his vision hit something horrifying. He turned back and realized it was a bald guy in a suit who had been beaten so badly that his own parents wouldn't recognize him. He was now coughing violently, his mouth both broken-toothed and bloody, tears and snot mixing together, his specific shape unclear. Chang-Su, who was just a playboy, was scared to death by this scene, and the muscular guy next to him said something about "let's start," which startled him. He asked in a trembling voice, "Who are you, sir?" But as Si Young expected, this guy really didn't recognize him. "But I have never forgotten you for a single moment." He was waiting. Several helicopters from the military and reporters had been dispatched to this building, along with a large number of police cars with blaring sirens below. A commander holding a small megaphone stood among a line of police officers holding up their shields, angrily calling out, "We don't know who you are. First state your identity and the reason you are doing this." Si Young looked at the scene outside. He chose this view so that he could see everyone clearly, and so that everyone could see him, and also to let the guy Chang-Su next to him know the situation of his hostage. Standing under the direct spotlight of the helicopter, Si Young gently called out, "Chang-Sua," which scared the kid to death. He couldn't understand why this guy knew his name. Who the hell is this guy? When he heard that mouth whisper, "It's me, Taxa Young," he saw the anger in the big guy's eyes along with the terror flooding his heart. "Taxi Young. I know him, but that kid was someone I used to trample under my feet." The Taxa Young of the past was a skinny, weak middle school kid compared to the young masters like Chang-Su, who were well-fed and physically strong, and could only endure the kicks day after day. Yet before Chang-Su's eyes now was a big, muscular guy. He couldn't believe his eyes, repeating in a daze, "You're Taxa Young." The police below, as soon as they heard him state his name, ordered their subordinates to quickly investigate the background of the person named Taxa Young, call the students who were taken to the hospital, and ask if any of them know this name. While below on the 4th floor, Si Young still stood there like that under the direct light of the helicopter. Chang-Su heard, but he didn't understand. Is this bastard really Taxa Young? That loser back then was only up to this guy's crotch. How did he change so drastically? What the hell did he eat to get so huge? The mouth peeking out from behind Si Young's long, disheveled hair moved. He began to talk about 3 years ago, making everyone present at the scene focus on his words. That was the clue for everyone to know who he was, without having to look up old records. A reporter among them turned pale. 3 years ago, that means the case from that year. He raised his right hand, drew the giant sword he wore on his back, and placed the tip directly on the blonde guy's neck, which made him turn pale. He opened his mouth and made ah sounds, as he felt the cold, sharp piece of metal cutting into his neck, drawing a line of blood. Unable to take it anymore, Chang-Su opened his mouth wide and screamed like someone being slaughtered. Before his throat was even cut, he was already crying and wailing, which made Si Young hate him. His eyes then turned to the group of reporters who were filming him up close. "My parents did that to call for attention, but in return, you all destroyed everything today from this moment on," he roared with all the volume he had right here. "I swear that all of you will pay with your own heads." Soon, Si Young's image was broadcast live on all screens in crowded places. They said it was a hostage situation near Samsung subway station around 11 p.m. tonight. The riot police and local police were confronting the hostage taker. Hearing Si Young's words, many people watching the news vaguely guessed that the hostage taker was the middle school son of the couple who had self-immolated 3 years ago. It was a story from 3 years ago, but now he's still a teenager under 20, and he already has that muscular body. People had a lot of questions. The reporters were also busy reporting, continuously afraid that some guy was impersonating the boy from that day, so the police had to quickly investigate carefully, even investigating his hometown, to avoid any mistakes. The police officer knew that among the 2 hostages being held, the blonde one was the son of the director of Aegis Security Company. No matter how you looked at it, this story wouldn't have a good ending. Because Aegis Security Company was the largest provider of security and bodyguard services in South Korea, headed by director Kim Sang-pil. On the surface, it was a very large company responsible for protecting the next president, but in reality, it was a nationwide gang. The son of the director of Company E, as he knew, was one of a number of perpetrators of the school violence case 3 years ago. Looking up at the big guy in front of him, he thought, if that person is really Taxi Young, one of the victims of the incident that happened 3 years ago, then his behavior today is generally understandable. Even if it is a bit more violent than usual, and the conclusion drawn was that the hostage was in danger. So he yelled into the megaphone asking, "What is the reason you are taking hostages? Speak up. What do you want?" Unexpectedly, from the mouth of a boy not yet 20 years old, he clearly said, "I have nothing to negotiate." This made a police officer like him most afraid. There was nothing more terrifying than a hostage taker who had no demands. It seemed Si Young knew this. He clearly repeated, "I have no demands. All I need to do is to inform everyone." Inform what everyone stared at Si Young. He slowly read out each name besides Chang Su who had bullied him, including Lee Soo-hyun, Jang Soo-jung, Kim Joo-rin, Lee Soo-ho, Jung Da-hun, and Nam Hee-jun. The last one, no need to read his name because he was already under Si Young's sword. His eyes lit up, his face full of menace. "All of you will die at my hands." On national television, he just declared, "Your parents will also die at my hands. Your brothers and sisters in your families will not escape either." Needless to say, everyone present, whether watching live or indirectly, was shocked. What the hell is wrong with this kid? He held out his hand to show his power to the people below. Even if you call the police or the army, it's like this clenched fist here. You can do whatever you want, because death will come for each and every one of you. Death will come from my own hands. I will find you, or you will have to find me before the police get here. Because if you don't stop me, I will kill all of you with these very hands. Next to him, Chang Su was terrified, crying so much. Yet he stubbornly turned back to question Si Young. "You know, you won't be able to survive either if something happens to me, right? And my father will find you and make you taste things that make you beg for death. Do you think you can escape, you son of a bitch?" Seeing Si Young's large hand clench the sword with a tremor, Chang Su thought he had succeeded. He's shaking. No matter how big he looks, he's still that same cowardly kid from back then. However, Chang Su's eyes now saw clearly that it wasn't fear on that mouth, but that he was angry. Si Young's hellish face was staring at the blonde young master, making the kid's soul fly straight to heaven. Looking down at the people below, he growled, "All of you look carefully. This is my declaration of war." After saying that, he lifted the tip of the sword a distance from Chang Su's head. With just one hand, he flicked it in a beautiful arc. Right before Chang Su could finish the two words Si Young, he had swung his hand straight down on the blonde guy's neck with great decisiveness, separating the head and body of the young master, and so he stood there waiting, his eyes watching the blonde guy's head fall straight down to the sidewalk below, bouncing once like a deflated ball. The police were silent for a few seconds as they watched the hostage's head fall right before their eyes. The reporters couldn't believe they had come here to report and saw such a horrifying scene. In a moment, the entire scene was chaotic with screams of terror, while Si Young comfortably slammed the tip of his sword onto the floor. He looked no different from a monster that had taken down its long-hunted prey. His face looked like it had been washed in the river of hell. The entire scene was broadcast live on all media outlets. The television station hastily cut the scene to switch to the studio, but it was too late. The scene of the son being beheaded was shown clearly and realistically right in front of Kim Sang-pil, who was clutching his iPad, trembling, unable to believe it. He slammed it on the table. Never before had Kim Sang-pil felt such a surge of anger as today. That son of a bitch! How dare he do that to my son? Tears streamed down his face, filled with hatred. I will definitely kill the one who touched my son. The second most bitter person was surely Jang Sung-chul. He had just become president not long ago, and already saw such a chaotic scene unfold before his eyes. He dialed his secretary to connect him to the police chief immediately. The chief was staring at the screen broadcasting the scene of Chang Su's head falling with a thud, and immediately picked up the phone, respectfully stating his name. "This is Lee Sung-bae." Without much ado, Sung-chul wanted to know if he had confirmed that what was happening on the screen was real or fake. As soon as he heard the chief report, it was real. Sung-chul couldn't hold it in anymore and roared, "Then what are you waiting for? Why haven't you given the order to shoot that bastard dead?" Two beams of light from the helicopter shone directly on the main character of today's event. See. Young stared menacingly at the blonde guy's head, just a few steps away from the police, not feeling any of his anger being soothed. But the police chief was furious. The mission he was leading, and the hostage was already dead. Just then, he heard the crackle of the radio on his hip, announce that an order had come from above to kill on sight. Just then, he heard the crackle of the radio on his hip announce that an order had come from above to kill on sight. He was surprised an order to kill on sight. Normally it wouldn't be issued, yet now Sniper Team 1 was ready on a nearby rooftop, Sniper Team 2 was as well, and Sniper Team 3 had also been mobilized at different points opposite the building, where Si Young was standing ready to rain bullets on him. By some miracle, Si Young saw it all. He looked down at the police officer who was looking around in confusion. Before he knew it, the riot police had been ordered to advance thunderously into the area, pointing their guns straight up at the only target up there. They were ready to open fire and take down Si Young at any moment. The current situation had surpassed the commander's control. He turned to look at Si Young up there, who showed no change in emotion at all. He just kept that gloomy, deathly expression. And finally opened his mouth to mumble, "You police." Before he could finish his sentence, he was hit by a bullet right in the face. Everyone was shocked. The order to shoot hasn't even been given, and you're already shooting people on live television. The barrel of Sniper Team 1's gun was still smoking. They reported mission complete, target eliminated. But strangely, he could still see the teenager standing tall. He was so fast that he had raised his sword to block the sniper bullet that had just been fired. Menacingly behind it was a gaze that seemed to be looking at the one who had just tried to assassinate him. The police were stunned when they received the report that Sniper Team 1 had failed. The chief's radio crackled with a grinding sound. "Kill him. This is my order. Kill him immediately." He was caught between an order and justice. It was unprecedented to order the killing of a teenager like this. Yet in the end, he pointed in that direction and ordered fire. So the riot police below fired continuously at Si Young, along with streams of bullets from other directions. They only saw his figure blur, and then disappear right before the eyes of the police. He was so stunned that he dropped the megaphone in his hand. His pupils caught Si Young's movement, and then his entire head tilted to the left to follow him. He had now jumped out of the original building, like a Superman without his underwear. How can a normal person do that? He aimed for a building on the other side of the street, and used his sword to slow down while his two legs swung on the hilt, sliding down a long way below, then used the momentum to swing himself in a circle and land on the ground without a single scratch on his body. However, what had just happened had made Si Young extremely angry. He knew that he would become the target of the riot police on the ground below. They will definitely not let this teenager escape. 3 or 4 riot police vehicles roared their engines and charged straight at Si Young, who was standing tall on the main road. He just stood there, declaring to the whole world, "Anyone who stops my revenge will die," as if he had switched to a mode of fighting to the death. Si Young stood there, holding his Thunder God sword facing the police car that was hurtling towards him. He raised his hand, swung his massive sword, and then pushed his body forward, feeling the wind brush past his hand. The muscles in his arm used all their strength to throw the sword, which sliced cleanly through the police car, splitting it in two. It continued on, crashing into the second car, embedding itself in the person driving in the front seat, causing the entire car to flip over wheels in the air, not giving the third car even a chance to change its route. Right before his eyes, he saw the second police car fly into the sky with the sword stuck in its front. Si Young's foot stomped hard on the ground, and then he suddenly shot out from where he had been standing, chasing after the speed of the sword stuck in the second police car. He then launched himself, jumping to the height of that car, grabbed the hilt of the sword, did a full circle in the air, pulled it out of the car, and then used the muscles in his arm to throw it down at the third car, hitting it directly on the roof. There were a few swing sounds, and then it exploded with a bang, no different from being bombed. The impact of the explosion was so terrible that the police on the other side of the road had to quickly cover their faces. And when the fire began to die down, they could see blazing amidst the flames a figure clearly walking towards them, flickering. But the sword in Si Young's hand was very clear. Gradually, the owner himself appeared without a single scratch on Si Young's face, filled with hatred and anger. He was like a monster about to kill everyone here. And what Mick was most concerned about right now was where he had bought his shirt, that it didn't burn even when licked by flames. The long-serving police officers stared in disbelief. What's going on? And more importantly, is this kid even human? See. Young walked up to them without a single scratch, not even his shirt catching fire, which made the police officer both angry and confused. He gritted his teeth and ordered all the police present to prepare to open fire. Following his order, they opened fire on that person who was neither human nor beast. The ground under Si-young's feet hadn't even been hit by a bullet before he had jumped up 2 meters high, avoiding the range of the police. They looked around in confusion, but this guy had disappeared. Just as they heard the sound of wind whistling past their ears, Si-young had landed on a police officer behind the commander, which startled him and made him turn around. The messy hair didn't block Si-young's view. He could clearly see 2 or 3 people aiming at him ready to shoot, because he had rushed into the middle of the police formation. Now, besides the 2 hostages at his feet, he was the target of more than a dozen gun barrels. Without flinching at all, he stood up and lifted his massive sword as if he was about to beat up everyone here, which made the team leader immediately say into his radio, "Call the snipers, get ready to shoot." They quickly aimed at a weak spot on Si-young's body and immediately reported back to the team leader that they were ready to open fire at any time with a command. It could be the carotid artery in the neck, or it could be the temple. The index finger was on the trigger, ready to fire at any moment. Bang, the sound of the bullet shot out of the sniper rifle from afar, hurtling towards Si-young, who was standing exposed in the middle of the road. Yet right before the bullet hit his temple, he immediately turned his head, catching its every movement, and then raised his sword to meet the bullet, deflecting it from its path and making it embed itself straight into the ground below. Just a simple glance like that was enough to make the team leader furious. He screamed as if he were having a seizure. "Stop this guy! Use anything you can! We have to stop this guy!" The police knew this too. Everyone was in a state of extreme tension, all pointing their guns at Si-young, yet he still stood there, as if not paying attention to the fact that the team leader had quietly left his position behind, letting the police aim and shoot at this big guy. Every movement of Si-young made the police terrified. They followed orders and had weapons, but the fear clung to their scalps. Suddenly someone in the group screamed, and then a series of gunshots rang out towards Si-young. But he simply bent down, swung his hand amidst the continuous barrage of bullets, and swept his sword across, hitting the police in front with a few loving pats. This time, he didn't just use the sharp edge of the blade to cut through their bodies, but he used the terrifying power created by the sword to slap away the entire group of police, sending them flying out of his immediate vicinity. A news camera caught the moment he and the police looked like the reporter had no chance to fight back and turned to run. "At least I have to keep my life to be able to broadcast live for the public to see." Fortunately, they made a very correct decision to escape from there, because the last police officer in the formation had been slapped by Sun and had his neck broken. The news station's camera lay rolling on the ground, capturing the entire scene of Si-young, no different from a monster thrashing the crowd. Every time he struck, he opened his mouth and roared, no different from a wild beast. The footage shown ended there, which was enough to make Soo-hyun's face turn pale, as he witnessed this big guy who was once someone he used to beat up in middle school. Behind him was Soo-young, trembling like she was having a seizure. She kept turning up the air conditioner temperature, but she felt a coldness, as if it were seeping into every blood vessel. In her ears was always Si-young's declaration. Even Soo-hyun felt desperate. "That bastard said what? I will kill your parents and your siblings and relatives." Because he was scared. He became even more angry because he had no ability to fight back against Si-young. Half an hour later, firefighters arrived at the boulevard to extinguish the fire that Si-young had caused after thrashing the police. 119 had just arrived and were busy calling each other, "Hurry up and handle this place. There are a lot of injured people too." He dragged a police officer in a shirt into a corner. The team leader from before angrily asked, "What did you say to that hostage taker?" He saw the team leader's tense expression and knew he had no choice but to tell the truth, but telling that story was no different from cutting off his own career path. Hesitation made the team leader go crazy. He roared, "Speak up." Finally, Gyungman had to recall the scene at that time. He saw thousands of sparks shining brightly. Si-young stood alone in the middle of the road staring at Gyungman, while dozens of police around him had been beaten to a pulp by him. Si-young's expression at that time made Gyungman terrified. In his life, he had never seen a person like this, let alone a teenager so terrifying. Finally, Gyungman closed his eyes and whimpered. That kid asked where the children who escaped from the kidnapping went. The team leader's face turned pale. From his expression, it was clear he had already said it. but he still asked again. "So what did you say to him?" Young man gritted his teeth in guilt and admitted, "I told him the children were taken to Shinjin University Hospital." He immediately got a slap across the face from the team leader without any mercy. Young man tilted to one side and then collapsed right in front of the team leader, completely unconscious. He quickly pulled out the radio on his hip and urgently called all forces. "The hostage-taker is heading to Shinjin University Hospital. I repeat, the hostage-taker is heading to Shinjin University Hospital. Everyone get there now." Soo-hyun and Soo-young hadn't said a word to each other since arriving at the hospital. Each of them sat in a corner with a different mood. The atmosphere was thick. But unfortunately, as long as the hospital room lights were on, how could they escape See-young's sight? He had already reached a building on the opposite side of the hospital, locked onto his target. Now all that was left was to act. Soo-hyun's hope was dashed when the news reported that the perpetrator of the hostage incident had escaped from the scene. Escaped from the police cordon was one thing, but more importantly, no one had been able to pinpoint this guy's location until now. Soo-hyun was bitter with fear. The room seemed to be submerged in the trembling of both of them. Unable to take it anymore, he clenched the remote control in his hand, opened his mouth, and screamed 2 curses to release his frustration. It was also at that moment that Ho-jung unexpectedly opened the door. Her face was calm as she looked at the student as if she had just been cursed by Soo-hyun. What now? He furiously looked at the newly arrived older sister. Fortunately, Ho-jung didn't say anything. She just quietly said, "I'm from the president's security detail," and behind her many men in suits entered the room without needing to ask for Soo-hyun's permission. They simply said, "We will escort you 2 out of here," and then a tall uncle went to the president's daughter, picked her up along with the blanket wrapped tightly around her like a child, and then left the room immediately. Soo-hyun looked at Soo-jung's unresisting appearance, not knowing what to do, and then finally followed the group. Currently following the president's security detail was probably the smartest choice. If he stayed here, who knew when that bastard would come for him? The room was soon empty, but every development had been captured down to the last detail by See-young on the opposite floor with his 110 vision. But every development had been captured down to the last detail by See-young on the opposite floor with his 110 vision. He took 1 step out of the rooftop of that building, and then lowered himself, looking no different from someone committing suicide. At that time, it was not yet known that the group had come to escort the 2 of them out of the room, because the police team leader had pulled out his radio to announce that the hostage-taker had escaped and was heading to Shinjin University Hospital. The news from the police was transmitted directly to the security detail's radio. They immediately stopped in the hallway with very serious expressions. Then a bald one raised his hand to signal everyone to stop. Soo-hyun, uneasy, kept asking over and over what's going on, but no one answered. He saw Nam Ho-jung nod slightly, signaling that she understood. However, the situation was not yet clear when on the glass pane near the bald guy, he saw See-young's large figure appear jumping in, using his entire giant body to smash through the glass door. Before his feet even touched the ground, his eyes had already swept over the group Soo-hyun and Ho-jung. And then he crashed into the opposite wall with inertia, creating a terrifying shockwave that made everyone present have to quickly cover themselves to avoid getting shards of glass in them. Anyone who saw this scene would surely not believe it. See-young, after landing from the rooftop of the building next door, had shot himself straight up to the 20th floor of the university hospital, creating that incredibly grand entrance. The people from the security detail didn't run away, but stood there warily waiting for the smoke and dust to clear. The hospital wall had a huge hole in it. Suddenly there was a small thud. As See-young's hand appeared on the edge of the wall, they began to sweat, looking up at the person who had just appeared and muttering, "This can't be real, right?" See-young looked no different from a monster, just emerging from its lair, staring at the uncles who were nearly a few dozen centimeters shorter than him. His eyes in general didn't care, just glanced over, and guessed how many people were here, and how many he had to get through to reach that Soo-hyun guy. See-young's gaze made him terrified, so scared that his teeth chattered and he couldn't move. Suddenly, someone pulled hard on Soo-hyun's coat, running towards the opposite direction. It was Nam Ho-jung grabbing him and yelling, "Move with us to the elevator on the opposite side. The bodyguards in front will block See-young's path." He saw the cowardly rats running away and called out, "Where do you think you're going? Don't you remember that day how your parents' power made my parents suffer? For me, they absolutely did not give up. They burned themselves in the square." The more he thought, the more he hated He gritted his teeth and roared Lee Soo-hyun's name, creating a huge gust of wind like a high-powered fan blowing through the hallway. The scream echoed in Soo-hyun's ears, terrifying him, but he didn't dare to stop for even a second, seeing the situation was not good. Ho-jung turned back and yelled at the bodyguards. "What the hell are you doing? Why aren't you shooting?" They only now came to their senses and started to draw their guns, but it was too late. The guy on the left was beaten to a pulp by Si-young more than just mush. The guy on the right had just pointed his gun, when he got a slap that the plastic surgery hospital would surely refuse to operate on, because Si-young's punch sent him flying out of the hole he had just made in the glass door. Looking from this angle, it was just hopeless. This time flying out of here, good luck finding a body to bury. The remaining bodyguards saw the scene of the first two being beaten so badly that they could only point their guns at Si-young, who would dare to get close to him and engage in physical combat. They all shouted in unison, "Fire!" Throughout the hospital hallway, the sound of bullets exploded continuously. The four of them had successfully reached the elevator. But Ho-jung's panic hadn't stopped. She slammed the elevator button, wanting it to close and go down quickly. Only a few seconds had passed, but it felt like a century. The door wouldn't close, and every moment the groans of the bodyguards echoed more and more clearly. Then the sound of someone's footsteps stepping on their blood and advancing towards the elevator door made the three of them wait with full vigilance. First, they saw a bodyguard in a suit appear, which made them relax for a moment. But when that face looked up with its mixed-up teeth and lips, gradually losing consciousness, only able to raise a hand to call for help, they knew they had been wrong. The poor bodyguard was pulled back by some force, and with a swish, the body that had been moving a moment ago was now stiff on the tip of the huge sword. His body was flung up by Se-young, staring down at the people in the elevator. At that moment, the elevator door closed without anyone noticing, because the scene before their eyes was too terrifying. Soo-hyun stood frozen like a statue. Everyone inside felt the same terror. Ho-jung didn't know what had just happened. Is that person even human to be so terrifying? Seeing the number 10 gradually change to 9. Soo-hyun screamed, "What the hell are we going down for? Aren't we supposed to leave by helicopter?" Before she could answer, above everyone's heads, they heard a terrifyingly loud bang that made the elevator feel like it had just been shot. They looked up wondering, what was that? In Ho-jung's terrified eyes, her thoughts were already completely in sync with the current situation. Si-young had jumped onto the roof of the elevator, tensing his arm muscles, preparing to bring down a powerful blow on this tin can. While the people inside were still waiting, not knowing what would happen to them, her combat experience told Ho-jung get down. She and the others ducked down immediately, right as Si-young was pointing the tip of his sword down at the elevator roof. He raised his sword with one hand, and then used his strength to plunge the sharp object so hard that it pierced the elevator ceiling. Fortunately, Ho-jung had told everyone to get down. If they had been hit by this thing from head to toe, they would have been no different from skewered meat. The elevator began to count down to 3. She had turned and called out to everyone. "As soon as the door opens, we have to run out of here immediately." Soo-hyun was pale, unable to say a word. Now every second, every minute from the 3rd floor down to the 1st was so long it made people anxious. Seeing the sword tip quietly retract, before they could breathe a sigh of relief, they saw Si-young plunge it down again and again all over the roof area. Fortunately, the elevator at Shinjin University was built taller than usual, so as long as they sat hunched over, the long sword wouldn't touch anyone's head. Right as Si-young was pounding on the elevator again, the door opened on the 1st floor. Soo-hyun was the first one to rush out, his mouth babbling, both scared to death and feeling lucky because the light of survival was right in front of him. He ran frantically outside first, followed by Ho-jung, who was also crawling out. The bodyguard carrying Soo-jung had just managed to get up and was about to run when he was immediately hit by the tip of Si-young's sword, which plunged straight into his left shoulder, probably dislocating his shoulder. Soo-young, in the hands of the strongest person, witnessed this scene, which made the girl's face turn pale. Blood splattered all over her tear-streaked face. By some miracle, the girl's instinct made her push the bodyguard away and throw herself out of the elevator. The sound gradually faded in the bodyguard's throat. He also wanted to escape, but couldn't. The sword was stuck too deep. Blood was flowing continuously. And before he knew it, the elevator ceiling had collapsed, crushing his neck with a crack. And then the entire elevator exploded with a loud bang, right as Soo-jung had successfully got her 2 feet out. Soo-hyun didn't dare to get close to his friend. Only Ho-jung rushed over to support her while the elevator was emitting thick smoke. Fear locked Soo-jung's legs to the ground. She wasn't injured in the leg, but she couldn't stand up and run, so Ho-jung had to support her owner, step by step, to get out of there. Soo-hyun wanted to approach but didn't dare. The fear made him tremble. Just a few seconds later, he saw a massive foot appear from behind the smoke, which made terror surge in his eyes. As expected, it was the monster Si-young, taking step after step out of the elevator, chasing them down. With his long sword, he appeared in front of the group, his voice low and deep, no different from coming from hell. "Where do you think you're going?" He called out to Soo-hyun, which was enough to make the kid piss his pants, let alone Soo-jung, who didn't even have the strength to cry anymore. The two of them would be the next to die after Chang-soo. But before he could act, a blue military jeep swerved through the glass door of the hospital, startling everyone present. Si-young wasn't surprised, but his eyes wanted to know which bastard had appeared at this very moment to obstruct him. The car made a wide arc, and when it was about 10 meters away from Si-young, it slid on the hospital's tiled floor and its right side hit Si-young. Yet he stood with his legs apart, taking the full force of the large car hitting him. He didn't seem to be completely injured, but the impact from it was so great that his legs slid on the tiled floor, and his entire body was sent flying into the wall on the other side of the hospital. The wheels of the jeep screeched to a halt in front of the three people, and the most tense one was Soo-hyun. Not knowing if they were friend or foe, unexpectedly the figure that got out of the jeep was familiar, which made him breathe a sigh of relief. Teacher Yang. He had never been so happy to see Teacher Yang as he was today, but the teacher had a very calm expression as he looked at the young people, immediately opening the door and saying, "Get in quick." Before they could get in, Si-young's foot had already stomped on the other end, signaling that he was back in the game. Everyone's actions were pushed to be faster than ever, but his eyes were now directed at Teacher Yang, which made it impossible for him to guess what was happening. The group had finished getting into the car, and the teacher immediately ordered drive now. His subordinate behind wanted to argue further, but was immediately sent away. "Clearly someone has to hold him back here so that he will let my students escape." So the subordinate had to obey the order even though he was reluctant, and drove the car away from Shinjin Hospital, leaving Teacher Yang to face the giant Si-young over there. He looked at the teacher, and then at the car that was driving away, yet he turned his head, not wanting to clash with Kang Reo-wool, which made him furious. He quickly drew the gun from his hip and fired 3 consecutive shots at Si-young to stop him. Indeed, Si-young's steps had stopped. He immediately turned his eyes to the person who was blocking him. "I don't know what kind of monster you crawled out of, but if you want to pursue those kids, you have to get past me first." With a gun in one hand and a knife in the other, he was ready to fight with Si-young. Yet he didn't say a word, just went straight for Teacher Yang with his fist on the hilt of his sword, and just like that slammed it straight into Reo-won's face. Causing his facial features to cave in along with his body, which flew a few meters away with a loud thud. Si-young had already said it, didn't he? "Anyone who gets in my way, I will deal with them regardless of their background or status." After dealing with the teacher, he glanced at the car that had just left, silently calculating. He caught up with the green car, which was mixed in with a convoy of 4 other identical cars as a kind of camouflage. The front was also led by several black cars. Soo-hyun was so scared that his voice trembled as he asked the driver, "Do you see him?" He couldn't see him through the rearview mirror, which eased the tension in the car by a few degrees. At this point, Ho-jung finally had time to call EC1 on the other end of the radio. "1 more minute until we reach the destination." Hearing the other side report that the pickup point would be on the Wyeondong Bridge, which had been cordoned off by the security detail beforehand, Ho-jung agreed, and then immediately leaned forward and told the driver, "As soon as we cross the bridge, turn right immediately." He wanted to argue further but was cut off by Ho-jung. "Who do you think I am?" Suddenly being scolded, the driver turned back and retorted, "I know you're from the president's security detail, but we already have the route created by the Shinjin group." While the convoy was speeding across the Wyeondong Bridge, something exploded with a loud bang about 50 meters away from them. From there, Si-young and his sword shot out, clearly visible under the silvery moonlight. His eyes were no different from a predator's. But it was unclear if Si-young could aim at the correct car with the 2 kids in it. Among the 5 identical jeeps, he aimed at the 4th one, which seemed to be running a little further away from the others. Si-young landed his large, healthy body on the roof of the car, which exploded with a bang as if a bomb had been dropped. Everyone in the other cars turned to look immediately. This time, the new Jeep was just a pile of scrap metal. Ho-jung couldn't believe that this guy was really chasing them to the death. She immediately turned to the driver and yelled, "We're almost at the pickup point. At all costs, we have to stop that bastard. Use any means necessary as long as it can make him stop." The Jeep under control swerved out of the line of 5 cars and shot forward. Ho-jung saw in the back seat a guy who had just pulled out a weapon case full of the latest X-band guns. With this caliber of weapon, needless to say, Ho-jung just stayed silent and let him do his thing. But wait, she realized that it wasn't a normal gun, but a grenade launcher. Once that grenade left the barrel, not to mention that big guy, even innocent civilians would die. As expected, the guy holding the gun tensed up, aimed, and then fired the grenade out of the barrel, intending to take out both Si-young and the people in the Jeep he was standing on. The explosion with a single bang caused a traffic jam in the surrounding area. The flames from the explosion flew with the wind, making Soo-hyun have to stick his head out to see if that guy was dead yet. With the eyes of someone who had never experienced battle, he quickly smiled slyly, thinking he had successfully taken him down. A grenade of that size, even a monster couldn't survive, let alone. Yet the monster Soo-hyun was talking about was now flying onto their Jeep. Landing squarely on the hood, Soo-hyun heard a thud and the metal part under his butt crumpled. Terror flooded the eyes of the people in the car. And the most terrified was Soo-jung, who started to cry and scream, her head in her hands, tears streaming down her face, looking extremely helpless. Si-young didn't care. He just used his sword to slash horizontally across the roof of the car, making it a convertible, so that everyone could clearly see his large body standing tall on the car. Si-young now looked no different from a monster who only knew how to kill, and his main target was everyone in the car. He would surely deliver a blow to end all of them. The sword came down, making the people in the car freeze. Only Ho-jung was clear-headed enough to yell at the driver brake. The car screeched to a halt, its nose dipping forward, flinging Si-young forward several dozen meters. Yet his eyes never left that Jeep for a second. He gently used his muscular arm to push the tip of his sword down onto the concrete road, braking himself to a screeching halt. He finally managed to stop without being pushed too far, while the Jeep was spinning around, trying to find a way to escape. The 3 people in the car stared into Si-young's unblinking eyes. He now heard thundering sounds from behind him. He looked back and saw several white smoke trails coming from a nearby bunker. It seemed the police had set up a temporary barricade to open fire on Si-young. At first, these things flew at a not-so-fast speed and seemed harmless, but when they hit the ground, they emitted a light and then exploded with a bang. It seemed to be a flare combined with smoke used to help the Jeep escape safely. On the police's side of the barricade, someone shouted, "Prepare to fire." The guns with seemingly endless magazines were aimed at Si-young. Right as he jumped out of the smoke, his hand grabbed a metal bar of the bridge, and he looked down, trying to figure out who was attacking him. Si-young's eyes were full of anger, as he saw the people below also staring at him. Following the order to fire, they immediately raised their guns and fired continuously at Si-young, who was dangling from the bridge like a monkey. He pushed his arm up on the bridge, and then weaved his body through the barrage of bullets charging at the police. When he collided with the ground where they were firing, he sent several of them flying. Although they had weapons in their hands, they were still terrified, staring and wondering how a single person could cause such a scene. Si-young stood there no different from a god, staring intently at the group of men and boys over there. He spoke gently, "If you want to live, leave here." They turned pale. It was the first time they had heard a criminal facing so many armed people so clearly give them a choice. Si-young's eyes were extremely agitated. He concluded, "If you don't get out, you'll die by my hand." The teenager's words hit the police officer's pride. They didn't care what this guy was saying, just pointed their guns straight at him, ready to give him a few shots to teach him a lesson. While they were busy with the police, the Jeep had stopped at the helicopter pickup point. Soo-hyun kept glancing around to make sure he had escaped. Even when the helicopter stopped to pick them up not far away, he still felt terrified. Just a few more steps, and he would be on the helicopter. But the police, where Si-young was standing, were flying into the air like lifeless dolls. With just a flick of his hand, he had sent people falling to the ground, their heads and necks broken in different ways. No two alike. His eyes never looked back at them, only staring at the person who was about to get on the helicopter and escape. The other 2 had already reached the place, leaving only Ho-jung climbing up, and Soo-hyun met the big guy's gaze from afar. He stomped one foot on the ground, and Si-young gathered his strength, preparing to throw his sword to impale that helicopter. At this distance, it was clear he could destroy it, and caused the two of them to die with it. But then Si Young stopped abruptly. He gently retracted his hand and muttered, "I can't." And so he let the helicopter take off and leave the Wyandotte Bridge. He watched it go, telling himself, "You two can't die so easily." So the helicopter took the young master and mistress along with Hojung away from the Wyandotte Bridge. Si Young's eyes had been fixed on it the whole time. He told himself he had to wait for the terror to flood the minds of the survivors, and then let despair drown you. At that time I will find each and every one of you. He strode purposefully across the Wyandotte Bridge, leaving there to prepare for his next plans. The Blue House that day had to hold a very urgent meeting to release the news, as well as the video obtained from the boulevard during the fight with Si Young. In the quiet meeting room, the terrified screams of the people he had killed echoed, piercing the nerves of the bigwigs present. Some people couldn't even bear to see Si Young's face, which was no different from a raging beast appearing clearly on the screen. The video stopped there. The secretary spoke up to inform everyone here that the suspect's name was Tak Se-young, currently 18 years old. The last place he was observed was on the Wyandotte Bridge. Hearing the report that investigations were being organized to find out more information about this person, the officials immediately started whispering among themselves. According to the current report, 3 years ago, Tak Se-young was one of the victims of school violence among teenagers in their tens. His middle school dropout information was shown to the officials. By the way, his parents self-immolated at Gwanghwamun Square, causing a public uproar for a long time. Before he could continue, suddenly at the end of the table, a man in a military uniform shouted, "Wait!" He looked at the female secretary and said, "Guess where Tak Se-young will go?" The female secretary couldn't guess that. Or rather, she didn't have the right to guess because the president was not present, so they had to ask her. Immediately, a dissenting voice arose in the meeting room, and at this time the president is absent. Narrowing his eyes at that person, the secretary replied in a low voice, "Because the president has already taken a step ahead." Jang Sung-chol was at the Blue Wing Media Building that day, along with the parents of the other kids, rewatching the footage of Si Young clearly reading out each name of the people he would hunt down. His face crazed as he declared, "You will die at my hands, and your parents will also die, and your brothers and sisters will not be an exception either." When the lights in the room were turned on, at the end of the footage, everyone was silent for a while. To be honest, anger was surging everywhere, along with an indescribable frustration. Because everyone present here was a high-ranking official, yet they were being threatened with being hunted down and killed by an 18-year-old kid. The reason was that Soo-hyun's father, the director of the Shinjin group, spoke up with a look of displeasure gritting his teeth. Although the director of Aegis Security, Kim Sang-pil, is not here, we still have to proceed with the meeting. First, we must block all search channels for that video. The president and Soo-jung's father continued. Mobilize all forces at Blue Wing and GF to prevent that video from spreading. Oh Young-suk, Jun-hyuk's mother, and also the director of Blue Wing Media heard this, but didn't rush to speak, instead thinking deeply with a difficult expression. Someone else spoke up instead. It's very difficult to block everything, which made Sung-chul not understand. Isn't Goodfin very good at this? According to Kim Jung-gu, Kim Seo-jin's father, his company Goodfield couldn't react in time, even though they had mobilized even their competitors in the media industry to block it, but the video had already spread all over the internet. Jo-young gritted his teeth. We definitely have to eliminate that guy to change the current situation. He was determined, but a fat old man's sigh was heard in the room, which made Sung-chul unhappy. He asked, "Mr. Hyun-suk, what's wrong?" He wiped the sweat from his shiny face. He was Da-hoon's father, and the owner of the Nan Finance Savings Bank. Of course, he didn't want his son to be in danger. But that guy stood before a gun and didn't even blink. How can we eliminate him now? Nam Ki-dong, Hee-jun's father and the deputy director of the tax bureau sat next to him and agreed, but didn't speak up, which made old Hyun-suk even more tense. That guy even dodged a sniper bullet. How can we kill him? How can we catch someone like that now? I heard Soo-jung and Soo-hyun barely escaped with their lives. What kind of monster is he that we can stop him? Jo-yang saw that he was right. Bullets can't even penetrate that body, so that kid doesn't care. Mrs. Dong-suk continued. That kid didn't even bother to dodge or run away. The president then spoke up, saying it was because the police were careless. If we had started using mercenaries and the army, even using firepower early on, that kid probably wouldn't have been so unscathed. With him being the president here, he dared to say such things. People looked at each other. thinking that calling in the army and mercenaries for this meant it was a matter of national security. Sung Chul added, "We don't need to catch him. Just use any means possible to eliminate him." Dong-suk suddenly interjected, asking, "Who will he come for next among us?" That was the most divisive question. A monster like that, no matter who he came for, it was feared that that person would not have the ability to resist. From the Wyeondong Bridge, Si-young walked barefoot into the community memorial park. He just carried his sword and walked in broad daylight, passing by the security office with a very prominent appearance, which made the janitor, who just glanced at him, tremble like a leaf. His colleague opened the door and asked why he was so pale, but when he looked in that direction and saw Se-young's back, they immediately agreed to call the police. But he wasn't doing anything, just sitting hunched in front of a grave that looked very sad, bowing his head before his parents' memorial tablet. He didn't remember how long it had been since he had last visited. Finally, Si-young spoke up, calling out, "Mom, Dad, I'm sorry." Finally, Si-young spoke up, calling out, "Mom, Dad, I'm sorry." He smiled brightly as if he were really talking to his parents. "I should have come here first. I'm sorry I'm a little late, aren't I?" There was no answer from his parents' tombstone, only the rustling of the wind. Then suddenly he started to cry, and then many tears streamed down, covering his face behind his messy hair. He bent over in pain, hugged himself, called out, "Dad, Mom," and cried, just like an 18-year-old who hadn't become an adult yet, because he missed his parents so much. And if he really had a choice, he naturally wouldn't want to be like this. He reached up to touch his parents' names on the tombstone and told himself, "You must be very worried about me, right? But don't worry, I know what I'm doing." Si-young wiped his tears with one hand and pushed himself up, because the police, like a swarm of flies, had already gathered, with car after car. Soon, the road outside the memorial park was full of cars with blaring sirens. They had brought the entire force here for just one person, Si-young, who was visiting his parents' grave. He told his parents in heaven, "Don't worry about me. I also promise you that I won't forgive a single one of them." He didn't turn his back, but he knew they had already cocked their guns and were aiming at his back, "Because I will kill every last one of them." Looking up at the sky with tear-filled eyes, Si-young knew that at that time, the two of them must have been so desperate and in so much pain. But those people and this whole country had not listened to his parents, so I won't listen to them either, no matter how many soldiers are in that group of police. This son who has lost his parents will make them taste the pain of losing their children, so I will leave behind a lovely Si-young of my parents here. He looked at the sneakers, the school bag, and the things he used when he was a normal middle school student. As he was talking to his parents, he heard the police officer shout loudly, "Tak Si-young, I have surrounded and mobilized the army to arrest you. Don't act rashly anymore and surrender immediately." His hand tightened on his sword and he promised his parents, "I will also leave behind all the fear and injustice that was not heard here." He turned to look at the helicopters being mobilized to eliminate him, and he wiped away the tears streaming down his face, a crazed look suddenly appearing, because a blood debt must be paid with blood. A police officer shouted through a megaphone, "Tak Se-young, put down your weapon and surrender. If you resist, you will be shot down immediately." So many police cars here, along with helicopters, showed that the police were not joking. Se-young glanced to his right and saw a group of people, including vans and other things. He glanced to his left and saw the same, all of that along with helicopters flying thwack-thwack overhead. He didn't understand why they had mobilized all that junk to a place full of graves. A machine gun protruded from a helicopter above, with the pilot ready to aim at the target shouting, "Prepare to fire." So many things just for Se-young alone. He looked up and saw the soldier turning the gun barrel 360 degrees, firing thwack-thwack, continuously tearing up the ground under his feet, even though Se-young had not shown any intention of attacking them. They fired the machine gun continuously until the dust was thick, and the gun barrel was red hot before they stopped. The helicopter continued to circle high above to see if the target had been eliminated. There was no sign of him, but the police officer kept shouting through the megaphone, "Tak Se-young, I demand you lower your weapon. If you move even a little, you will be shot immediately." What a damn threat when they had already shot at him. Before he knew it, the police officer realized his words were wrong when, from behind the thick black smoke, a sword was thrown out, flying under the sunlight. It was aimed right at the helicopter that had just shot at Se-young, and there was no way that thing could dodge the terrifying speed of the sword tip that was hurtling towards it. In a flash, the metal part was easily pierced by the sword tip with a keng sound, and sparks flew out. Before the horrified eyes of the police team leader, After throwing it, Si Young roared in anger. At the place where my mother and father rest, how dare you do this? This is a lesson for anyone who disturbs the cemetery, you hear. Si Young's sword plunged into the middle of the helicopter. It tilted for a moment, then leaned completely to one side, emitting thick flames, lost control, and crashed into the pile of police cars below. This time there was no escaping even on all fours. The police below were sweating profusely, and died along with the helicopter that crashed and exploded. The group on the right, including the police team leader, was lucky to escape. Horrified to realize that everyone on the left wing had either been burned to death or injured in the crash and were lying scattered on the ground. But the culprit was still standing there staring at the remaining people. He was immediately hit by a bullet right in the right cheek and then another bang sound. This time it wasn't from the police. They didn't know anything. They turned back to the direction the bullet had just come from to see what the hell it was this time. Unexpectedly, as soon as the team leader looked over, he saw, holy crap, that wasn't a normal bullet. It was a tank shell. Oh my God, not one, but 3 tanks were lined up on the road at the other end of the cemetery. The one in the middle had just fired a shell and was still emitting thick smoke. He didn't know when that tank had arrived. But what he felt was more serious was that there seemed to be movement in the black smoke in the middle of the cemetery. Indeed, Si Young was not dead yet. He stepped out of the smoke, looking no different from a bull whose fur had been singed. His contemptuous eyes looked straight at the people closest to him. The police, which made everyone freeze immediately, sweating profusely. His bare hand touched the floor. Si Young, without a word, shot out from the cemetery to where the second column of smoke was coming from where he was standing. The police officer realized that it seemed to be where the helicopter had just crashed. He was about to think what he was doing there, when he realized that Si Young always had his weapon with him, so as soon as they looked, they turned pale, discovering that the monster had his sword back in his hand. He swept his thunder god sword in a circle, splitting the smoke and dust in two, letting his eyes stare intently at the team leader over there. Fear filled him, and he backed away. From behind, the army ran in the opposite direction, immediately taking a defensive posture along with the police. They all pointed their guns at Si Young. It seemed he was repeating history once again, just like the day he stepped out of the smoke on the highway. This time, Si Young had no intention of replaying that scene. He looked at the people with hatred, and then put the hilt of his sword in his mouth, and lowered his center of gravity, placing both hands on the ground. He immediately used his wolf form, creating a body movement like a wild wolf about to pounce on the prey before it. Modern soldiers. How would they know what this image meant? They raised their guns at the command of the police team leader. Fire. They immediately opened fire as Si Young's feet had already left the spot where he had just been standing. Without raising his head, he continuously ran through the barrage of bullets, aiming for the people right in the middle of the army. A middle-aged uncle, when he realized he was charging at him with terrifying speed, raised his gun barrel intending to aim, but it was too late. Si Young split off from the path he had been running on, veering to the right and then the left. He was like a ball hitting the corners of a wall and bouncing off people. Every time he left a soldier, he left behind a painful scream and endless bleeding. Clearly without using his limbs, Si Young could still use his sword very smoothly, cutting the throats or some part of the bodies of the police and soldiers he had just passed. Some of them suffered a very painful death, not even having time to gasp. Si Young's jaw was still clenched on the hilt, looking every bit like a beast sweeping through the crowd. "What's going on?" The police chief turned back and forth, still not understanding how he was still standing. Around him, people were lying flat on the ground, covered in blood. Those who were still alive and uninjured were all holding their heads and screaming due to the psychological trauma of witnessing such a horrifying scene. Si Young found a place to land on the ground nearby. His mouth still holding the sword, he still didn't know who was leading these people to attack. At the same time, a directive from the command headquarters came down to the general. He answered the phone immediately, his eyes not leaving Si Young while listening to the order from the other end. "Bring that child back here alive." Hearing that strange order, he glanced at the phone as if he had misheard. The other side repeated, "You must bring him back alive. That child will become a talent for this country." The command headquarters child was the guy who was almost 2 meters tall, clenching a sword and killing people wherever he went. The order from the command headquarters came down at the same time. Si Young was gliding through the soldiers, gradually getting deeper into their formation. The other side continuously reminded him, "You must capture him alive," which made the general roar, "How can we capture him alive? In this situation, we still have to use firepower, and we can't even scratch his skin. On the other side, there was a loud bang after Si Young escaped from a tank shell that had just been fired at him. Yet the command headquarters on the other end seemed not to care, resolutely ordering, "Stop the firepower immediately. Don't let him die." The cemetery soon became a flat ground as the tank outside had just fired another shot at Si Young. He opened his mouth, pulled out his sword, and then jumped onto the tank that had just attacked him. Landing on the tank's hood, his weight made it dip its head forward while his hand plunged into the control room. A light flashed on Si Young's face, and then the place exploded with a bang, startling the people on the general's side. Seeing that the other end had hung up, he was furious. How can you capture a kid like this alive? Giving an order without saying how can anyone do it? On the highway several dozen kilometers away, traffic was still moving normally. A prominent black car, a yawning Aegis, was slowly weaving through the lane. Behind it were several similar cars with the same words on the side. In every car were people in armor and fully equipped with guns. A middle-aged man glanced at the person behind him and said, "If we use those things, then even if the target is wearing armor, he won't be able to hold out." The young man with the two-part haircut waved his hand towards the back and asked, "Those things?" What he was talking about was in the white pickup truck running alongside the black cars. In it were all sorts of weapons from heavy to very heavy lying scattered on the floor or mounted on the walls on both sides. Then you have to understand that he saw his son's head get severed right before his eyes. He must be going crazy. The middle-aged man in front disagreed, thinking that if they made a mess like that, they would have to clean up the mess later. "What mess?" The young man with the split hair laughed mockingly with his patched-up mouth, and then leaned forward whispering to the middle-aged man. "Currently all the security guards who have contracts in the Middle East have been cancelled and withdrawn to this country." That information made the middle-aged uncle turn pale and ask back, "Is that true?" "If it's not true, why would I say it?" he growled. "That's nothing. 20 times that number of people from branches all over this country pouring into Seoul right now. That meant the entire manpower of E would be mobilized to the capital." That information made everyone in the car fall silent. He leaned back in his seat, his mouth muttering, the pain of losing a son might make him start a war right in the middle of this city. The fight at the cemetery was very quickly transmitted to the Ministry of National Defense. They were again pulled into an emergency meeting, and the white-haired old man at the head of this department had never seen such a horrifying scene. The people below were discussing the only target. Almost no one could offer any useful words at this time. Rubbing his aching forehead, he asked the female secretary next to him, "So that kid got away." According to her, no one could currently monitor where Si Young was, so he wanted to know how the Bravo platoon sent to catch that kid was doing. Someone below spoke up. "The casualties are too high, so they are requesting urgent reinforcements." Next, an old lady on the right angrily urged for the next operational plan because the army was still waiting for orders. He decided right away, call all the platoon leaders and all the remaining teams except for Bravo team in here. The female secretary frowned in confusion. What level of situation requires gathering the entire army? With his long combat experience, the commander had never met a person like this before. So he wanted to know how with just one person that kid could injure an entire army. Even the tank squadron was destroyed. When they received the news that Si Young was holding his sword and leisurely walking on the main road, leaving the cemetery burning fiercely large plumes of fire rising from it without anyone extinguishing them, he was angrily walking on the road, when he suddenly opened his eyes wide and looked back to the left, at the familiar place under the late afternoon sun. Wasn't that the image of his parents carrying the young Si Young on their backs, strolling through this area? He stared at that scene for a long time, realizing it was just a mirage caused by the sunlight. He turned his face away, both sad and disappointed. It was also because of that Si Young knew what he needed to do next to avenge his hatred. Regardless of the torn shirt on his back, he took steady steps out of this cemetery. And so since the day Chang-Soo was beheaded in front of the media, Jun-hyuk had always been at home guarded on all four sides by bodyguards, but he still didn't feel safe at all. He always held his face and cursed, "Did that bastard Chang-Soo rat me out for ordering him?" The question that needed to be clarified here was whether that bastard Chang-Soo died because he bullied someone or was just unlucky. After searching for an answer for a long time without finding one, Jun-hyuk leaned back and silently cursed that Chang-Soo was truly the most useless of the useless. If that bastard really did rat me out, then isn't the next target me? He opened his mouth to gasp for air, cursing that useless Changsu who couldn't even be of any damn help even in death. While he was cursing, the phone on the chair next to him buzzed violently. He had no mind to answer the phone at this time, but the other end showed 3 words, Kim Seo-jin.